huge, hyped-up crowd is completely swarming this stand. Right in the middle of the noisy crowd, a guy asks his assistant for the goods, and the nervous girl quickly hands them over while thanking him for waiting. The two of them celebrate selling out and immediately start counting up all that sweet cash. After taking down the capital, they walked away with a massive 16 million yen. The little girl is totally blown away by Shiro's sales game and thinks he's basically a magician. Shiro gets all flustered and tells her she's totally overreacting. Suddenly we're back in modern Japan, and Rishiru is standing in the middle of the woods, staring at a portal that leads straight to his bedroom. He doesn't say a word about the massive fantasy city behind him and his grandma's altar sitting right in front of him. He starts breaking down the whole story of how he actually ended up at the house his grandma left for him. He opens the closet in the altar room and finds a straight-up portal to another world. Shiro slams the door shut, convinced he's just seeing things because his old trashy job totally fried his brain. He swings the closet door open again and totally freaks out when he realizes it was all actually real. His grandma was hiding a massive secret, and after she vanished 7 years ago, the government officially declared her dead. Ever since he was a little kid, Shiro was always asking about that secret. She just kept telling him he'd have to wait until he was older to find out the truth. The old lady died before she could spill the secret, but she left a letter with instructions right next to a photo. She writes a letter saying sorry for keeping secrets and drops the truth. She's actually a witch from a world called Rufagio. So she explains that the closet is actually a gateway to a magical world called Rufagio, which is full of crazy monsters and non-human races, and the old witch even left him a special ring that lets him understand their language perfectly. She tells Sherry to read the 2 books hidden right behind the altar. He finds the ring hidden in the books, but the writing is a total mystery until his grandma's voice echoes in his head, reminding him he needs to actually play the ring. He's super hyped because he can finally understand every single word on the page. While he's reading, a voice suddenly pops into his head to tell him he just unlocked the equivalent exchange skill. Shiro jumps back in shock and starts frantically looking around for anyone nearby. But then it hits him he's actually Alum. Just like a video game, he unlocks a brand new skill called inventory. He's totally torn, trying to decide if he should actually go. Then he remembers his grandma's words, that everything would finally make sense once he actually got there. He gets all his gear ready and decides to head out the very next morning. He takes a second to say a quick prayer for his grandma. The next morning, Shiro heads out, totally hyped to finally start his big adventure. After walking for what feels like forever, he finally makes it to a city. The streets are totally packed with warriors, cat girls, and mages just hanging out everywhere. He's super pumped to be in the city, but he suddenly realizes he's starving after that long walk. Shiro spots a skewer stand and gets curious, asking the vendor what kind of meat they're actually serving. The vendor says it's horned rabbit, and it's a total steal at just 3 bronze coins. The guy says sorry for being totally broke, leaving the shopkeeper absolutely fuming. Just thinking about that skewer has him totally drooling for a bite. He remembers he's still got 4,200 yen left from the convenience store and really wishes he could just use that cash to buy the skewers. Right then, a magic circle glows in his hand, and yen is suddenly replaced by a single coin. The guy is totally hyped and sprints over to the food stand to ask the vendor if that coin he just found is actually made of bronze. The shopkeeper says yeah, but he thinks it's super weird and just figures Shiro must be from another country. Shiro is hyped because his power to trade things for equal value is finally working. And he orders 3 skewers. He's scarfing down the food while staying totally humble. But he's totally let down because the seasoning is actually super basic. He starts testing his powers by flipping those coins right back into yen. He finally realized what he could do with this insane power. He can trade those coins in whenever he wants. He realizes he's about to be absolutely swimming in cash. He keeps pushing his experiments even further, using way more power until he finally crafts a solid silver coin. He heads back to the food stall and asks if he can use that to pay. But the seller tells him he's actually short on change. Shiro figures out what just went down and counts up all his cash. He takes a quick detour to scope out the area, until he finally hits the market. Shiro's super pumped to chat with everyone there, especially those cat girls. He realizes everyone is staring because his modern clothes stick out like crazy. Suddenly, this little girl walks up and offers him some flowers. She looks super nervous and totally freezes up the second Shiro asks for the price. He starts weighing the cost, and she's totally freaking out now. She actually backs down and lowers what she's asking for. The guy picks out a yellow flower and hands the girl 3 bronze coins, which totally catches her off guard. He tells her that for that kind of cash, he's gonna need some serious answers. He asks who she is, and the little girl says her name's Aina. Shuru steps up and tells her his name, too. Armed with the intel Ana hooked them up with, he finds out he's actually in Ninoritch, a district that's part of the Jalum kingdom. Money comes in 3 types. Bronze is basically 100 yen, silver is 10,000, and gold is worth a massive 1 million yen. Most people only make 8 silver coins a month, and gold coins are so rare that almost nobody has ever even seen one. Plus, you couldn't sell a single thing without the government's permission, even if you were just a kid like Anna. Shuru buys even more flowers from the girl, leaving her totally stunned. She tells him not to worry, saying a decoration with just 1 flower would look totally weird anyway. Aina is honestly just so incredibly thankful. He tells him his grandma is gonna be so hyped to see those beautiful flowers. She's honestly super touched by what he says about those flowers. Shuru asks her to take him straight to the government office. Aina is super hyped as she points them in the right direction. Aina lets everyone know they've finally made it. She points at a massive building all hyped up, but Shuru gets nervous and asks if being a foreigner will cause trouble, so the girl promises him that everyone there is actually super nice. He's totally freezing up while talking to the staff, but then this grumpy old elf pops out of nowhere and starts grilling him for answers. She hands him the form and breaks down exactly how he needs to fill it out. He can also work for a street vendor, paying 10 bronze coins a day to haul the guy's stuff around and sell it. This vendor with the same prices just set up a shop right in one spot. Lastly, running the shop costs 3 silver coins a day, and the elf says you've got to sign a contract for at least 10 days. Sherry picks the second auction and hands the form to the worker, who thinks the name on it is super weird. He yells that it's a total steal, but instantly regrets it since he has no idea how prices work in this world. Yale chills out and explains the prices are low because the mayor keeps them in check, wishing the guy the best of luck with his business. Shuru thanks Aina and admits he's honestly shocked they pulled it off. Then he tells the little girl thanks and says he's heading back to the market. Aina looks super bummed to see him go, but she just gives a shy nod and looks at the ground as she says goodbye. He starts walking off, but she notices he's going the totally wrong way and yells out all flustered, pointing him in the complete opposite direction. They hit the market, and the little girl asks Shuru what he's actually planning to sell. He looks super confident and starts to announce his big product, but then he totally blanks and admits he has no clue, so Na smiles at how unsure he is and suggests selling gear for adventurers since the city is packed with them. The girl gives him a heads up, so Shuru looks around and spots a sorceress, a warrior, and a whole squad of soldiers. Aina explains that this is all happening because the forest is absolutely crawling with monsters. He wonders if the monsters are hiding in those woods and starts picturing a gross beast attacking him with its tentacles. He thinks over her idea, but she looks totally bummed as she explains that this is exactly why she can't sell many flowers. She lights up again seeing all those flowers Shuru picked out, and with a massive smile, she tells him she's just so happy they met. Anna's words make him blush like crazy, so she offers to lead him through the market. First, they hit a lantern shop where the owner actually looks like a lantern, then a sleeping bag store with a guy in a cat cloak, and finally a knife and rope shop where a girl in a bunny suit is literally tying a dude up. Shuru is totally blown away by all the cool shops and gear everywhere, and the little girl looks super smug as she brags about being right, but when she tries to act tough by thumping. She grabs Shira's hand to show him all the shops, and he just stares at her with a smile, thinking about how she's totally wife material. Anna is yapping nonstop, but he's totally zoned out, dreaming about finally having a beautiful wife and a daughter of his own. The girl cuts him off with a creepy question about what he's selling, but when he leans in to whisper the answer, she just looks totally lost and confused. The next morning rolls around, and our guy is already up and stretching, totally hyped to start making his stuff when the girl suddenly pops up to say hi. Shuru asks if she's selling flowers again today, and she tells him she's already been up since sunrise picking a fresh batch. The guy cheers her up by saying the flowers look great, and she's totally going to sell out, making Aina beam as she explains she's buying medicine for her sick mom before they both promise to catch each other later. Anna's sprinting with her flower basket to hand them out, but she slams right into someone and wipes out on the ground. Watching this with tears in his eyes, he starts rooting for her and promises to give it his absolute best too. Out of nowhere, their first customer shows up and asks what he's even selling. The customer is totally confused by the box Shura handed him and asks if it's some kind of craft, but Shura explains it's actually a matchbox with a tiny stick inside that can start a fire. The adventurer says he's never heard of anything like that and can't believe a tiny piece of wood could actually start a fire. Shuru strikes the match against the box to spark a little flame, leaving the customer staring at it with a totally confused look. He starts shoving everyone aside in a total panic, making a huge scene because he's completely blown away by what he just saw. The adventurer hits the dirt and asks how he pulled that off, totally amazed, while Shiro just holds a lit match right in front of him. Shiro just shrugs like it's no big deal, asking the guy if he's seriously never seen this before. Then he counts down and lights the match one last time. A crowd starts swarming the second they see the adventurer's face, and everyone there is totally losing it. Everyone is guessing it's some kind of dark magic or a crazy enchanted tool, but honestly, nobody has ever seen anything like this before. The guy tells everyone his matches are super easy to use, and the crowd is totally blown away when they start testing them out. Shuru just smirks, totally satisfied that everything is going exactly the way he planned. While hitting the market with Anna, he realized this world had never even heard of matches, so he headed back home to grab a bunch of boxes to sell. An old elf says he hasn't seen anything like this in 250 years. The lizard man is totally hyped, and even that adventurer from before knows this is absolutely insane. Starting a fire with rocks takes forever, and those magic items are way too heavy to lug around. And without a witch's help, it takes forever to get a fire going, which Shuru totally agrees with while wearing a super smug look. He starts a speech like a tech billionaire at a massive product launch, telling the crowd their struggles are over because he's finally brought them freedom. The kid is totally rocking a Steve Jobs outfit, holding up a tiny box while the crowd goes absolutely wild. The guy asks who's buying and someone jumps at the chance, but they're cut off by a serious adventurer who just wants to know the price of the matches. The whole crowd is buzzing, wondering if these things cost a total fortune. Shiro is actually super hyped for this exact moment. He asks the adventurer what he thinks they're worth, and after a quick second, the guy says 80 bronze coins, making the young man flash a big smile. Shiro realizes he's got two choices: sell it as a high-end luxury item or drop the price and make a killing off the massive demand. During the first auction, he was gonna make bank on every single sale, but the price was so high that almost nobody could actually buy anything. The second choice means way more people can buy it, but his profits might actually take a hit. He hypes up the crowd, announcing that every box has 40 matches, and since it's his grand opening, he's letting them go for a special price of just 5 bronze coins. Everyone's totally shocked, but they start buying like crazy, and even though Shiro warns them to keep the matches dry, the guy sells to over 100 people until he's completely sold out, leaving one old man empty-handed. He says sorry and promises to get him a spot in line tomorrow, but the old guy gets totally offended and snaps that he's only 120 years old. Shiri crashes on the floor totally drained, wondering how there were so many people today and how tomorrow is gonna be even more packed. The sky turns dark as he wonders if he can even do this, but seeing a flower hit the ground makes him realize he's got everything he needs. Now we see Anna, and she's reaching down to grab a flower that just fell. She's super hyped as she keeps selling her flowers for cheap, but then out of nowhere, someone screams her name. She whips around and is totally shocked to see Shuru, but when she asks about the shop, he tells her he's already sold out and closed up for the day. Eamon is stoked for him, but the second Shuru asks about her, she gets all shy and hides her basket of flowers. Her face turns bright red as she says she has no clue, and she starts tearing up because she can't figure out why her flowers aren't selling. Shuru's still mad but asks if she's okay, so she wipes her tears, tells him she's fine, and sprints off to sell her flowers. The guy grabs her arm and begs her to wait, and while she's standing there totally confused, he looks at her with teary eyes and asks her to just listen. She screams, "What did you say?" And he just asks her to help him out tomorrow, making her wonder if he's actually doing okay. Shira cuts her off and says he's asking for her help because she's the only one who can actually pull this off. He tells her he's gonna pay for her help, and she just looks down at the ground. She's super hyped and says she's got it because she's so excited to finally work with Shuro. The guy tries to thank her, but Anna tells him it's no big deal since she hasn't actually sold a single flower yet. She grabs his hand and tells him that she's actually the one who owes him a huge thank you. He looks at Inna with a super sweet expression that shows he really cares about her. After that super real thank you she gave him, he realizes he's really gonna have to put in the work. Cheru asks if they can hang out again the very next day. The little girl is still holding his hand when she gives a super creepy reply, telling him they totally can. They say their goodbyes, and the guy scans the area to make sure they're totally alone and nobody is watching. He quickly pops open a portal back to his world so he doesn't get caught. He explains that the closet portal works from anywhere, but worries about rumors spreading, so he just hops through and heads back home. The second he steps through the portal and gets back home, he immediately checks to see how much cash he made. She uses equivalent exchange to flip that cash into yen, and he realizes he just made 215,550 yen in a single day, and he's completely blown away because that's way more than he used to make at his old job. Shiru starts dreaming about never working again and just gaming or reading manga all day, but he quickly snaps back to reality to get ready for tomorrow. Next, we see Shiru at the supermarket, hunting through the aisles to find where the matchboxes are. He finds them, but then he spots these crazy survival matches that work in wind and rain, and he's totally shocked because he didn't even know they were a thing. He grabs a ton of boxes to sell to adventurers for some easy cash, while the cashier just stares at him like he's totally lost it. Bettany's arms are totally loaded, and he realizes he messed up by not thinking about how heavy this stuff would be to lug home, but then he gets a genius idea if equivalent exchange works here. He ducks into a quiet spot and zaps all his shopping into his secret storage space. Suddenly, a massive rip just tears straight through reality itself. He's totally caught off guard, but he starts hurling those packages into the rift, and once he's finished, he's hyped to finally have his very own pocket dimension. He remembers the days of stuffing everything into a backpack, and man, his back still kills him from that old job. He realizes there's no way he could have carried all this loot if he was still stuck using a regular bag. He's totally blown away when he realizes he can see the stats for every item inside that massive magic circle, making him wonder if his powers are actually infinite and what his grandma is even up to. Shiru looks at his hands, realizing he's finally done carrying heavy loads for the rest of his life. He's gonna stick to selling matches for 4 more days, then he'll figure out what his next big hustle is gonna be. The guy raises his arm and brags that with these powers, he's gonna be filthy rich. Suddenly, a little girl points him out and tells her mom that the weird guy is talking to himself again, so her mom scolds her, while a super embarrassed Shiru just shuts up and heads home. Anna starts her morning in a totally normal brick house, waving goodbye to her mom as she heads out. There are flowers sitting on the windowsill, while Anna's mom rests in bed, asking her daughter if she's really leaving them behind. The little girl flashes a big smile and says she's not worried, since she's gonna make sure her shot hits the mark. Back in the real world, Shiro's at his grandma's house, asking for her blessing right in front of her altar. He dives through the portal, super hyped to get the day started. Aina's walking through the city with a massive smile on her face. Shiru finally catches up to her, says hey, and apologizes for being totally late. She tries to act like she just got there, but Shur keeps pushing her until she finally admits she's been waiting for a while. She tells Shiro that a huge line of customers is already starting to form. He finally notices a crowd is already waiting at the shop, and while Aina is totally hyped to start, he tells her he still needs a minute to get everything ready. Right then, he realizes the crowd for his shop is so massive that they're actually blocking the way for all the other stores. He realizes this is bad news because it reminds him way too much of his old job. Another shop owner points out the massive line, so Shiro steps up to get the crowd under control. He takes a closer look and realizes it's actually the guy from the skewer stall. The guy catches up to Shuru and says he heard the stories about the matchsticks, but he's totally shocked it's actually him. He notices the line isn't moving at all, so he asks the guy what's going on, and Shuru spills everything about the trouble with the other shops. The merchant gets the picture, and his buddy tells Shira she can use their stall for free today since it's a bit further away. Shuru asks if it's cool, and she says it's totally fine since they're on a break, so he thanks her while In-Na's eyes start sparkling with excitement. The kid asks if she's the merchant's wife, but the guy shuts him down fast saying she's his sister, and when the gorgeous girl winks at Sharu, he's totally stunned because they look absolutely nothing alike. Shiru and Aina follow the map as they head straight for the roasted meat shop. The second they show up, the two of them start scrambling to get everything sorted out. Shiro breaks down the items and sizes for Aina, and even though she says she's got this, she looks totally stressed out. He asks if she's okay since she's acting. The line outside is absolutely massive, but the staff finally says sorry for the wait and announces they're officially open for business. Shiru calls for the priority ticket holders to step forward, and gives Anna a quick rundown on how to take orders. The Grove is a little shaken up, but it still does exactly what Shiro says. He wasn't even that shocked since those boxes sold out in a total flash. The line is still massive, so Shiro calls up the next customer while the girl watches everything go down. She's totally blown away by how insane this is and wonders if this is just the straight-up magic of sales. They have to shut down early, and the guy says sorry to the customers because they're totally sold out. I honestly can't believe this, and now Shiro is claiming she's the one who made it all happen. He gives a quick thanks to the skewer stall owners and starts counting up all the coins they just raked in. He's completely blown away because he only expected 200,000 yen, but in just 3 hours, they've already raked in a massive 1.5 million. He takes it all back once he realizes he's making almost 490,000 yen an hour, wondering if this is the kind of crazy money millionaires pull in. He decides to bail before anyone robs him, but the second he throws on his backpack, the insane weight almost makes him tip over. It's way too heavy, and even though he could just stash it in his pocket dimension, he doesn't want anyone seeing his secret power. When he sees it won't work, he just gives Anna a bag of coins for her help, and she lights up, super thankful. Shiro gives the girl a quick head pat and tells her to buy a gift for her mom since she was such a big help. Anna says she's the one who should be saying thanks for the job, but Shiro totally cuts her off. He tells her to quit with the thank yous, saying she totally earned this through her own hard work before giving her a quick wink. She starts pouting and insists she still owes him a huge thanks, making Shiro just crack up. Right then, her stomach lets out a massive growl, and she's totally dying of embarrassment. The guy opens up a bag, complaining that they haven't had a single break, and asks the girl to grab a bite with him. Shiro pulls some sandwiches out of the bag, and Anna starts drooling like crazy as she asks if it's actually bread. The second she takes a bite, she's totally obsessed and says it tastes amazing, her eyes literally glowing with joy while Shiro just smiles, stoked that she actually loves it. Right as they're digging into their meal, someone covered in wounds starts heading straight for them. She asks if he's got a second to talk, and she's this tall, stylish girl with long hair. She says she's heard some wild rumors about the matches and asks if Shiro was the one selling. He says yeah, but everything's already sold out, and she just tells him she didn't come here to shop. She puts her hand over her heart and tells him he's the whole reason she showed up. She introduces herself as Karen Sankarika, and it turns out she's actually the mayor of the city. Karen admits she's late, looking super fit and healthy, while he's just standing there in total shock because he can't believe the mayor herself actually came to find him. He's totally shocked that the mayor is this young, beautiful woman because he expected some massive, muscular dude instead. The guy nervously asks what she wants to talk about, while No keeps a super close eye on them. Karen bows super low, thanking him for bringing a top-tier merchant like Shiro to do business in their city. Shura tells her he's the one who should be thanking her for letting him sell his gear, and she thinks he's being way too humble. She warns him that the merchants there are super stubborn, while he just stands there looking totally lost. Suddenly she spins around and tells him he can actually help, making Shrew totally lose his cool while they start chatting, and Anna passes out dreaming about a massive feast. Karen says since the city is in the middle of nowhere, these merchants act like they're doing everyone a massive favor just by showing up, so they charge crazy high prices while buying local stuff for dirt cheap, and it's totally wrecking the city's money. She tells him she's gonna fix the whole mess, while Shure watches in total shock, and then she hypes up her big idea to build a city market. Once she finishes explaining, the look on his face makes things feel super awkward. She hands him a key and tells him he's the one who needs to keep it safe. He's totally confused and wonders if it's a key to her place, but he knows there's no way she's actually inviting him into a harem. Karen winks at him and tells him it's actually the key to her house. Shiro is left totally shook, and when she asks what's up, he just brushes it off and says it's nothing. Anna says she totally gets it, but then she drops the news that the mayor actually wants to move in with Shiro. He asks what she's talking about, so the little girl repeats that the mayor wants to marry him, making Karen grit her teeth and totally deny it because she's so embarrassed. She gets super defensive and swears she isn't looking for love with everything she's got. She pulls herself together to ask for a favor, but Shiro cuts her off to ask if she's married, making Karen turn bright red as she shouts that she's single. She points to an empty house and tells Shiro he can use a key to get in, but starting tomorrow, he's gotta sell his stuff on the first floor. Sherwood acts shocked and asks why, but he totally called it when she says other shopkeepers are complaining. They couldn't sell a single thing because the line at Shiro's shop was absolutely massive. He totally gets that working like that has to be a complete nightmare. Karen flashes a smug grin and offers to show him around, telling him there's totally no rush to make a choice. They walk through the city until they reach the house Karen offered, and honestly, their jaws just hit the floor. Shiru's double-checking if this is legit, but Inae's already doing victory laps around the shop, while the lady just hopes they're happy with it. She says she's got one more question, then leans in close to whisper that the mayor might just be wondering if he's single. His face turns bright red as he yells that he gets it and definitely doesn't have a girlfriend. The mayor gets totally embarrassed and stammers that she wasn't even going to ask that. He says he's just kidding, but Karen is still blushing like crazy, and then the mayor gets all serious and asks why he's selling his stuff in this city. She looks pretty bummed as she explains that only 500 people live in this tiny town, telling him he'd make way more cash in a bigger city. Shiru admits it, she's totally right. He tells them he actually loves it there, even though he's only been in the city for 3 days. He realizes Inna worked her heart out to help him at the shop, and he's honestly shocked the mayor was so nice to him since he's just the new guy in town. He tells her that because of that, he's totally in love with this whole city. The mayor is totally touched by his speech, and her face lights up with pure respect. He thinks back to all the people he met in Ninoritch and realizes that even though he's from another world, no other place could ever be as friendly as this one. Karen clutches her heart, getting super emotional as she thanks him for those kind words. Aina is totally shocked and calls Shiru out for making a girl cry, so he quickly apologizes and says he didn't mean to do it. The mayor reaches out and tells him to just call her Karen, so he shakes her hand and says his name is Jashiru. Then Aina jumps in to introduce herself as they all share a big. The mayor welcomes them and says he's stoked to finally meet the crew. A graph shows his insane climb from selling matches to owning a shop in just 3 days, and he pictures his grandma up in heaven smiling and throwing up a peace sign. The very next day, he locks it in and signs the 1-month contract for his brand new shop. Fast forward 5 days, and Shiryu drops the news that they're completely sold out, leaving the customers totally shocked. Now he's rocking a suit and tie, but he's totally confused checking his notes since he thought he'd sold enough to supply the whole city. Anna cuts him off right then to say she's finally finished cleaning the whole shop. Yaret tells her she can chill upstairs and take a break. She offers to help him out, but he says she's done enough today. The little girl looks kinda bummed. Shiru stretches out in his chair and gets his snacks all set up on a tray. But just as he goes to hand it over, he realizes Aina is already fast asleep. He just stares at the little girl, watching her sleep. She starts talking to him thinking he's her dad, so Shiro has to step in and tell her who he actually is. But then she just asks him for a hug, so he just scoops Anna up right into his arms. She's so happy her dad finally hugged her, and after saying her mom does the same thing, she drifts right back into a deep sleep. This left the guy completely stunned. He starts wondering if he's a dad now, so he wraps her in a blanket and tells her he's got her back for whatever she needs. Anna's still smiling in her sleep, and right then, Shiru decides he's gonna do whatever it takes to help her out. It's already day 6 of the shop's big sale, and Shira tells Anna she can finally take the day off. He's totally wiped out because he forgot how tough it is to work solo, but right then, the mayor walks into the shop. The guy tells her he's totally sold out again, and while she thinks he's just a pro, he explains the real problem is that he's somehow selling way more stuff than there are actual people in the city. The mayor steps up and says she's been hearing some wild rumors. Turns out some people are actually reselling his stuff in other cities. He thinks they should limit how much each person can buy, but then Karen gets dead serious and says she's actually there to ask for a favor. Seeing how serious things are getting, the guy leads her upstairs and asks what she needs him to do. But before she gives him an answer, she asks Shuru if he even knows about the city's Adventurers Guild. The guy confirms it's called Silver Moon, and the mayor is totally shocked he already knows the city. Shuro explains that it's because a ton of his customers are actually adventurers. The guild is basically a massive agency that takes jobs from all over and hands them out to adventurers who work for themselves. The organization pays you for every mission you crush, from slaying monsters that terrorize the people to hunting down rare herbs for medicine and tons of other jobs. Karen points out that since it's way easier, Silver Moon is actually the only guild in the entire city. She starts talking about the guild master, but Shiru suddenly cuts her off, looking totally annoyed. The guild master is the big boss of the whole group and has some serious power. The guy suddenly bolts upright, asking if something went down with the guild master. The mayor waits a second and then finally speaks up. He actually bolted because he was totally freaked out. Karen keeps venting about how the guild is totally broke, and she's scared every adventurer will just ditch the city, which the guy realizes would be a total nightmare. The mayor reveals she's got a plan ready, because she's always prepared for when things get this crazy. She drops the news that the Big Shot Adventurers Guild from the capital wants to open a brand new branch right here in the city. But she keeps saying no just because she's looking out for Silver Moon. With everything going down, taking the capital's deal is definitely their best move right now. Karen beams and thanks him, but when Shiro catches a glimpse of her, he gets totally flustered and looks away, acting like it's no big deal. The mayor tells her that if she actually takes the job, the Big Shot Guild from the capital is dropping by to decide if they'll actually open this new branch. She asks Sherry to whip out those matchboxes so everyone can see. He says he's totally fine with showing them and wonders what the big deal is, but Karen is losing her mind because she's never seen anything like it, even in the capital, and asks where he even got it. She trips over her words and says sorry for asking, but explains that if he's the only one with the goods, the guild is gonna be way more hyped. He says he gets it and knows he has to grab the Capital Guild's attention if he wants to make it big. The mayor is feeling super awkward, but Shiro tells her it's okay and promises to bring back a surprise that'll totally blow her mind. Kerrigan calls him a super nice guy and shyly promises to pay him back one day. Fast forward to the next day, and Aina is already back on the clock at work. She catches Shira looking super worried and asks if everything is actually okay. He stretches out, totally locked in on finding something that'll really blow the guild inspectors away. Out of nowhere, he stands up and tells the girl he's gotta head over to Karen's house right now. He gets to the house and Karen is totally stunned by Shira's request, asking him if he's actually for real, and tells them straight up that he wants to be an adventurer. He asks the squad if he can finally join their team. Hinorin asks if he's actually serious about tagging along on their quests, and he says he's all in because it's the only way to truly understand what they need. The mayor got super serious and asked if he really knew the risks, since that forest is the only place adventurers ever go around there. We catch a quick look at the eastern forest, where a massive, shadowy wolf monster is lurking. Shiro says he gets it and suggests just being a herb-collecting adventurer, which Karen thinks is a way safer plan. She wants to introduce him to some adventurers, but she's actually beefing with the Silver Moon Guild right now. Perrin explains how the guild's submaster crept through the shadows to her house last night, totally desperate and begging her for some cash. He's sobbing his eyes out and just loses it, throwing himself right onto the floor. Shiro was totally stunned by how blunt she was, and when he asked what the guild needed, Karen just held up 10 fingers. The guy asks if it's 10 coppers, but she shakes her head, so he tries 10 silvers, only for the mayor to say no again, while the sheriffs lose their minds because the actual price is 10 gold coins, which is basically 10 million yen. She snaps at him for being so loud and looks down, saying that kind of money doesn't even exist in this tiny town, though she might have thought about it if it was only a tenth of that. Asking the guild for backup is going to be impossible after she just blew them off, and the mayor can only stare at the ink stand on her desk. He scribbles a quick letter and hands it to Shiro, but warns him not to get his hopes up. Shiro wastes no time and heads straight for the Silver Moon Guild. When he finally gets there, he's super nervous because he's never been to this spot before. He walks into a total wreck of a room, and suddenly, an adventurer jumps him and slams him right onto the floor. The warrior says he's the new guy and needs to pay his respects, but Shura scrambles up, insisting he's just a merchant and not an adventurer. The adventurer keeps scaring the guy, telling the rich merchant he should put a price tag on the punch he's about to take. Shura sneaks away, thinking there's no way this is actually real, and ducks through a door. He stepped inside and immediately asked if he was actually allowed to be there. He looks around, but the room is totally empty. Then suddenly, he feels someone watching him. He calls out to see who's there, spots a counter, and catches the sound of someone crying. He walks right up and says he's got a letter from the mayor. She doesn't even notice him until he taps her shoulder and asks for a moment, making the girl with rabbit ears and a long ponytail turn around to see what he wants. She completely freaks out because she doesn't recognize Shuru, screaming to know who he is and how long he's been lurking there, while Shuru just wonders if she's actually in the guild. She just keeps screaming, demanding to know why he touched her and asking if Shuru has a crush on her or something. She warns them that as the Silver Moon Girl, she can summon 1,000 buff guys with just one word, totally seeing herself as the captain of a massive rebel army. Shur snaps her back to reality and asks if she's really all alone, but she says sometimes people show up, then stubbornly claims she can take him down by herself. She waves her arms around, bragging that her punch can literally smash through solid rock. The guy gives her a disappointed look, already knowing she's gonna be a total pain to deal with. Shiro cuts her off again, asking where the backup master is and telling her to call him over right now. She says she can handle it, but then she drops the bomb that she's the substitute guild master, leaving Shiro totally stunned. Mill the rabbit girl remembers how she became the new guild master, and honestly, it's just because she was the only staff member left. There was another girl there, but she totally vanished the moment the old master bylaid. Emil slams a bottle down and, totally wasted, spills the beans to Shiro about the affair, shouting that they had no clue she'd already caught them. And the whole thing kicked off with them sneaking kisses in the corners. They end up getting all lovey-dovey in the master's room, but she starts screaming curses, wishing they lose everything, get wrecked, and sold off as slaves. The metal points out that her old master stunk like a dog, but then it tries to comfort her by saying she really gave it her all. He asks if she's finally done venting, and she thanks him for being so sweet and listening to her complain for 5 straight hours. With a bright red face, she starts unbuttoning. Emil buttons her shirt back up and asks what he's doing there, so he just hands her the letter from the mayor. The second he hears who it's from, Emil starts talking total trash and roasting them nonstop. Shiro's totally lost and thinks his grandma's ring is glitching, so he tells her she's just confused and explains the letter is actually from Ms. Karen, the mayor of Ninoritch. Emil just keeps trashing the mayor, calling her a total idiot and a heartless monster. She snatches the letter right out of Shiro's hands, saying if it's from Karen, they should just rip it into a million pieces. Shiro screams in total shock, while the girl tells him that stuff like cheating and betrayal is just straight-up trash. The mill turns to him and asks what his deal is with Karen. She's totally fuming because the mayor kicked Silver Moon to the curb and replaced them with a different guild. She's convinced the mayor is a total creep, and right on cue, Karen lets out a huge sneeze back at her office. The girl is devastated because even after she begged at the mayor's feet, Karen still wouldn't give her the 10 gold coins, and now the mill is straight-up cursing Karen. Shura tries to calm everyone down, saying it was a massive amount of money and Karen probably just had other stuff on her mind. She suddenly whips around and gets in Shiru's face, calling him out for defending the mayor so much. She asks him straight up if he's actually into Karen. She breaks down in tears and finally admits she still loves the mayor and considers her her absolute best friend. Shiru thinks you should never talk smack about anyone, especially your own best friend. Mel wipes away her tears and says that without that cash, Vilder is totally cooked and she has no clue what to do next. He tells her he'll let her off the hook for shredding the letter since she finally opened up about her drama with the mayor. Shiru hands Emil a handkerchief and tells him he's actually got a job for the guild to take on. She stands up and fixes her hat, asking what the job is. He tells her he wants to tag along on an adventurer's mission, and while Emil says she'll ask, she warns him that this has literally never happened before. The guy asks if it's hard to set up, and she tells him there's really only one group that can pull it off. These 4 are total high-level pros, so hiring them is definitely gonna cost a ton of cash. She reveals the group's name is Azure Flash, and we see the whole squad chilling by a forest campfire, a long-haired sorceress, a tall older cleric, a young warrior, and even a cat girl. Emil starts crunching the numbers, but right before she can say it'll be 36 silver coins, Shiro cuts her off and slams a heavy coin right onto the counter. He shows off 100 silver coins and asks if that's enough, even saying he can pay way more if he has to. Her eyes go wide in total shock. She doesn't even try to hide how stunned she is by that massive pile of cash. Without thinking, she just blurts out a question. Shiro keeps it real and tells them he's just a rookie merchant. He asks if she's ready to talk business, and after a deep breath, she confirms the cash is way more than enough to cover the mission fee. She gives him a super mysterious wink, and as Sharu watches her, he totally freaks out when he realizes Emil is actually unbuttoning her clothes, leaving him completely confused and blinking in shock. She's blushing hard while staring him down, and then she slowly starts stripping right in front of him. She walks up with a sweet smile and admits that even though she looks innocent. Belle leans in with a sneaky look and asks if she can just call him Shiro, but he shuts her down instantly, making her laugh and say he's mean even though she doesn't. Then she tells him to just call her Emmy, making them feel way closer than before. She whispers in his ear that Shiro is special because he's super rich, and his whole face turns bright red. He finally breaks free from Mimmel's grip, his heart pounding like crazy as he bolts away without looking back, totally focused on meeting those adventurers tomorrow. Shiro starts replaying everything in his head. He thinks back to every single moment since he first arrived in this world. He remembers finding that secret portal hidden in the wardrobe, and he definitely hasn't. Things moved so fast that before he knew it, he was already working at the shop the mayor hooked him up with. He starts wondering about the Silver Moon Guild drama and cringes thinking back to that random, awkward meeting with the substitute master, Emil. Anna snaps him out of his daze, looking super worried as she asks if he's really gonna shut the shop down for a while. Cheru nods and says she's only going to be an adventurer for 3 days, and Aina just smiles because she's actually relieved to have some time for her own stuff too. He's super worried and asks if something's wrong, but Aina just gives him a sweet smile and tells him it's nothing. Right before she heads out, she tells him to stay safe. With the goodbyes finally over, Cheru heads straight for the guild. He stops dead in his tracks, right in front of the massive wooden door. He reaches out to open it, but he's totally shocked to see a familiar face standing right there. Emil suddenly pops out of nowhere, says she's been waiting for him, and tells him to get inside right now. Sheer totally freezes as he remembers everything from last night, his face turning bright red as he looks away, but Emil just asks why he's so scared and promises she's not actually gonna. She switches gears with a quick wave and introduces a whole squad of adventurers. These guys are silver ranks, the total pride of the guild, and as Shiryu looks them over, he spots a rookie sitting on a nearby bench who seems really into what's happening. Emil explains that this crew is joining Shuru to find rare herbs, but while two big guys glare at Sharu, a guy suddenly stands up before the leader can even be introduced. He greets Shuru with a massive, hyped-up smile and says it's been forever, but Shuru just blinks, totally lost as he tries to remember who this guy even is. Suddenly it clicks, this adventurer was actually the very first person to buy her matches. The kid finally introduces himself as Liar, and he's actually the leader of the whole crew. Lighter points out an older dude in priest robes named Rolf, who walks up to Shuru with a big smile and says he's stoked for them to work together. Liar drops a major bomb. Rolf might be a healer, but he's actually a total beast in battle who swings a heavy mace, and while he's usually super chill, lie. Next up is a girl with long hair rocking a cloak and a giant witch hat, and she's even holding a staff. Her name's Neska, and she's the group's official sorceress. Liar nudges her to speak up, so Neska blankly mumbles a quick hello, while Liar just grins and explains that even though she's super quiet, her magic skills are actually insane. The only catch is her magic takes way too long to charge, but right then, Neska bonks Liar on the head with her staff and tells him to stay out of her business. Liar grumbles that he's not doing a thing until she learns to cast faster, so Nesko just rolls her eyes and says she'll think about it. Liar's right in the middle of the intros when things get wild. Someone in the back of the room suddenly pulls off a massive flip. This girl flips down and sticks a perfect landing between Liar and Shuru, introducing herself as Kilfa with a huge burst of energy, while Shuru watches her with total curiosity. He spots her cat ears twitching and just can't help asking if she's actually part of the cat race. Liar gets dead serious and explains that tons of people, even guild clients, actually hate this race, but Kilful just looks at him and says that's super weird. Shuru is totally fuming that anyone could hate such a cute race, while Kilda just strikes a pose and says he's making her blush. Lyra flexes that she's the group's scout in charge of spotting traps and keeping everyone safe, while a hyped-up Kilfa jumps in to say she fights with a bow and dagger. Shurev is totally blown away, but Kilful just laughs and says he hasn't seen anything yet. Then Lyra gets serious and points out she's also a pro at running. The guild leader claps his hands and asks if they're ready to head out, then looks at Shuru to see if he's set, and Shuru shouts back that he's totally pumped. Liar really vibes with the guy's upbeat energy and tells him they're heading straight for the eastern forest. Then it just strolls right up to a bar. She hesitates for a second, but as soon as she opens the door, a drunk guy stands up and starts heading right for her. He remembers her from the other day and reaches for her face, telling her he's keeping his promise just like he said. Right then the door slams shut. Shur looks over at his new squad, Rolf the monk warrior and Neska the sorceress, and he can see they're totally locked in. Meet Kilfa the scout and the totally fearless leader of the warrior liar squad. He thinks about the adventure he just kicked off and crosses his fingers that nothing goes wrong. Kilfa leads the squad down a skinny forest path while everyone keeps their eyes peeled, ready for anything. The guy is totally on edge, but Liar notices and promises they'll dodge any monsters, making him sigh in relief as they keep on walking. Lyra's complaining about how boring herb hunting is, and even though Kilfer says she's found a ton, Rolf warns that the rare ones are way harder to track down, but the monk says once they find them, the mission is officially over. He's totally stressing, and Nesca points out that it's almost dark out, making Lara stop and think for a second. He decides to set up camp right on the spot, leaving Shiru totally shocked and asking if it's way too early to stop. The warrior just grins and tells him that the golden rule for any adventurer is to get some rest whenever they actually have the chance. Shiru gets all choked up, wishing his old boss had said those words to him, while Lyra gets everyone busy setting up camp as Shara and Kilfa gather wood and Rolf starts hacking down trees with his axe. Lyra sparks up the fire with the matches he bought and tells Shiru these things are a total game changer. The cleric is totally stoked and says they're seriously grateful for the sponsorship. Lyra even jokes that he'd make a ton of money selling them off in the capital. Shiru hangs on every word while Rolf goes along with the plan, but he warns that the scary merchant association will hunt him down if they find out. Lyra just laughs it off, saying the cleric's predictions are always dead on, and Shiru is totally blown away by how accurate they are. Nesco walks up complaining that he's starving, so Lyra calls everyone over to eat since they've been hiking all day long. Shiru just stares while the sorceress totally scarfs down a piece of bread. He checks the menu and sees nothing but rock-hard bread and dry meat, wondering how even the toughest adventurers can actually survive on this stuff. Kilfa stares him down and asks if he's eaten yet, then she rips off a piece of meat with her teeth and offers it to him. Shura turns her down and says he actually brought something cool as he starts opening up his bag. Lyra's watching closely while Rolf's jaw hits the floor as Shuru pulls out some mystery packages, and the leader can't believe they're looking at a massive stash of canned food. Mesta gulps in stress as Lyra asks Shuru if he's really gonna eat all that food alone, but Shuru shocks the whole group by saying he actually brought enough for everyone. Scherer explains he's just testing out new gear for his shop and wants to know what they think, making everyone stop and think for a second. Lyra realizes they're actually free samples, so the whole squad starts celebrating and everyone grabs a snack to try. Lyra snags the outfit while Killfoot just chows down on a rice cake. Rolf tries out a little bread roll and Nesca bites into a chocolate bar, and they're both totally blown away by how amazing it tastes. Shiru watches the crowd and sees that everyone is totally loving the food after that first bite. Kilful passes out from a total food coma while Meska hugs his candy, swearing he'll never forget that chocolatey goodness, and Rolf is literally sobbing over his cross, calling the whole meal a gift from God. They're totally out cold, and Nesca is even mumbling about chocolate in her sleep. Lyra walks up to Shuru and tells him he needs to get some rest too. Shura tells her he's not used to going to bed this early, so Lyra invites him to stay up and talk. Staring into his tea, the guy notices no one is using sleeping bags, and Lyra explains they have to be ready to bolt the second danger shows up. He throws a blanket over the sorceress and says one isn't enough for the winter, but carrying any more would just be way too heavy. He sighs and wishes he had a storage skill, which makes the other guy straight up choke on his tea. He asks about the spatial storage skill, and Lyra tells him it's insanely rare, with only one person in 100,000 actually having it. He says some old dungeon has a book with this skill, but Shiru plays it cool because he's actually the one who has it. He asked the warrior exactly how much cash they'd score if they actually found it. Later thinks the question is pretty weird, but he says if it can hold a whole carriage, you could literally buy a mansion with it. Shiru turns totally pale because he knows it's true. Lyra admits that's way more than he'd ever see in his whole life, and the merchant is just glad. Shore says he's hitting the hay, but suddenly Lyra picks up on a weird vibe. He pulls out his sword, and while Shiru is totally lost and asking questions, Lyra just signals for him to stay quiet. He wakes up Kilfa and Rolf, then tells Shiru to go get the sorcerers out of bed. The leader senses something creeping up and shouts for everyone to get ready because a monster is about to pounce. This sorceress is literally mumbling about chocolate in her sleep until Shiru shakes her awake, telling her to forget the candy because they're in a massive emergency. Nesca wakes up with her usual blank face, but then Kilfa catches a scent, and Lyra asks if she's picked up on something. A scout looks worried and says things are looking rough, because since she can't smell a thing, the monster has to be downwind, making Rolf realize this beast is actually smart, so Lyra. But before she can even move, a massive crash cuts them both off. The warrior whips around in total shock and gets into a fighting stance, his eyes popping out of his head when he sees that the figure is actually a massive killer bear. Lara takes one look and realizes a silver-rank team doesn't stand a chance, and the guy gets a total chill just seeing how massive that monster is. The leader thinks they should run for it, but Rolf shuts him down, saying it's impossible for everyone except Kilfil since she's a cat person. The cat girl crosses her arms and refuses to ditch her squad, even though the cleric is screaming they can't win, and the scout is literally squealing in fear, but while Lyra stays totally. He's wondering what their next move is, but Rolf gets dead serious and tells him someone has to be the bait. The leader gives the nod, and you can practically hear everyone gulp as the whole room gets super tense. Shiro treats this whole mess like a quiz and starts weighing his options for bait. Himself, the new guy who just joined today, or the dude who's actually a real adventurer. He sighs, realizing he's the bait no matter what he chooses, right as Lyra puts her hand on his shoulder. Shiro accepts his end, totally expecting a sorry for being used as bait just so the rest of the team could survive. Lyra totally blindsides him by ordering him to run away with Nesca and Kilfo, while he and Rolf distract the monster, leaving Shiro absolutely speechless. Lyra tries to apologize, but the cleric just smiles and tells him it's no big deal after their long trip, leaving the guy totally stunned by the decision before he can even say a word. Nesca steps up to join the fight, but the warrior shuts her down, telling her she's way too slow and would just be a total drag. He jokes that he just wants to look cool for her before he goes out, and Lyra smiles at the sorceress, asking her to just understand. Nesca looks down and calls him a total idiot. The warrior gets into his stance and tells Rolf to keep a healing spell ready to go. He says as long as he doesn't get one. Lyra says he's gonna set a trap, and as soon as it goes off, everyone has to run for it. Kilfa's eyes go wide as she yells that something is right behind them, but Lyra refuses to believe it's actually happening. He looks into the dark woods and realizes they're totally trapped by two massive killer bears as the beastly war's echo finally begins. Nesca backs away as the leader screams for her and Kilfa to run, and even though Rolf says he'll help hold the line, Nesca just stands there shaking, crying out that they're all gonna die. The monsters lunge forward and trap the group, and while his heart is absolutely pounding, he suddenly hears his grandma's voice ringing in his head. He tells him that even when things look totally hopeless, you can never just throw in the towel. He starts digging through his bag like crazy while Lyre and Shock wonder what he's up to, and even though the warrior screams at him to run, Shuro ignores the warning and stares. He locks in and chucks a gadget straight at the beast. The monster freezes on the spot, its whole body completely paralyzed. Now, the explosives hanging in the air are ready to blow. The fireworks go off and the monster just freezes, leaving the group totally stunned while Shuro takes his shot and charges straight at it. He screamed that the bear was gonna regret ever showing its face to him. He doesn't even blink as he whips out a spray and blasts the animal right in the face. The bear freezes for a second before lunging, but Lyre screams a warning just as the monster tries to sneak attack him from behind. He whips around and sprays it again, making the monster even more confused. He stares at the can in total shock, seeing just how insanely well this stuff actually works. Lyre walks up, super curious, and asks if that was some kind of magic. He just smiles and says it's a special item, showing off a can that's actually packed with deadly poison that goes off the second you break the seal. The merchants tell them to grab this chance and run for it while they still can. Lyre cuts in to ask if the poison blinded the monster or messed up its nose, because if it worked, they can't let this perfect chance go to waste. The whole squad catches on instantly and gears up for the fight. After that insane fight finally wrapped up, they finally take the W and start celebrating their big win against the monsters right in the middle of the woods. Lyre warns them it's time to start carving up all that bear meat, but Sherba takes the chance to tease him by asking if he's actually in love with Nesca. The warrior and the mages are straight up freaking out. They're totally blushing and asking what he means, while he remembers Lyra teasing him for acting cool for a girl, so the leader just shrugs to try and drop the subject. These monster parts are worth a ton of money, so Rolf takes charge of the butchering and tells his crew exactly how to skin and carve them up. Kilfa checks out the claws and asks what they're even gonna do with the bottom half of the bear. The cleric explains those parts are actually for making medicine and tells her to start cutting, which completely scars Shuro for life. Lyra walks right up to Shuro. He looks dead serious and asks something huge, telling him to scrap the herb mission and get back to the city right now. He points at the dead bear and tells the merchant they should head back to sell the loot before it rots, since this haul is worth way more than just some herbs. Lyra keeps the surprises coming by telling him that half of all that loot is actually his. They'd all be dead meat if it wasn't for the gear this guy brought, and as he holds up the spray can, he realizes this thing must have cost a fortune. Shiri calms him down, reminding him that the only thing that really matters is that they all made it out alive. The merchant's words really hit the Lyre, who just grins and starts hyping up how generous Chiro is. Kilfa stops for a split second before suddenly lunging at him, shouting that he's actually a really awesome guy. Shuri ducks the hug, sending Kulfa face first into a bush, while Nesca and the merchant just stand there and watch. The sorceress totally agrees that Shiryu is a legit good guy, and Rolf adds that the world would be way better if more merchants were like him. Shrew gets all flustered and quickly changes the subject, telling Lyre he totally gets why they need to head back to the city. He steps up and offers to lug around all the loot from that killer bear. Lyre just starts laughing, totally convinced that Shiro is way too weak to actually do anything. Before he can even finish, Shiro rips a hole in reality with his storage power, leaving the whole squad speechless while he awkwardly apologizes for keeping it a secret. Lyre shakes off the shock and tells him it's no big deal, even though she's totally lying to his face. Just as Shura gets ready to head out, Lyre cuts in and tells them to keep moving because he's got plenty of room to carry all the loot. Shiro doesn't even get a second to complain before he's stuck on this wild adventure for 2 more days. They finally make it back to the city, and Ina is absolutely hyped to see Shiro again. Lyre gets curious and asks if the girl is Shira's daughter, but he quickly clears it up and says she's just his shop assistant. The warrior introduces himself, hands Aina the shot key, and tells her to just wait right there. Then the gang hits up the Silver Mood Guild to turn in their quest, but the moment they swing that door open, they find Emile collapsed on the floor, crying her eyes out as she begs some guy for more time to get the cash. Shiro thought this mission would be a total breeze, but now he's actually pretty hooked by what's going down. The guy screams at Mill, telling her he's sick of hearing the same excuses for months, and he's officially done waiting. Shiro asks who the guy is, and Lyre explains it's Gerald, a materials merchant who was tight with the old guild master. The kid walks right up, introduces himself, and asks for a minute to talk so he can finally figure out what's going on. Gerald pulls off his hat and tells everyone exactly who he is. He claimed he lent the guild 10 gold coins, and since they couldn't pay him back, he was taking their entire building as payment. He holds out the contract from the Silver Moon Guild, and Mel just lowers her head. The guy makes it clear that if he doesn't get his cash, he's taking the whole place for himself. He explains that the whole area is part of the property, so selling it gets him all his money back, and Gerald orders Emile to go grab the deed right now. She stubbornly refuses and says there's no way she's doing that, so the guy asks why she's still being loyal when the guild completely ditched her and there's zero hope left. Mel looks up with a dead serious face, telling them it's about way more than just duty, while Shiro and Lyre watch her nervously, and she admits that for a half-breed. She thinks back on all the highs and lows of living there and realizes the happy times were way more important, so with a warm smile, she swears she's never letting those memories go, no matter what. Watching her react like that, Shiro suddenly remembers something huge. 5 years ago, the whole family met up at his grandma's place because she'd been missing without a trace for 2 whole years. Shira's memory is a bit fuzzy, but he remembers his mom saying she was gonna sell the house because keeping it was just a waste. The second he heard those words, the guy dropped to his knees right in front of her. He begged her not to sell the place because it was full of memories of his grandma, feeling totally embarrassed while all his relatives watched in pure shock. Shiro jumps in to stop the drama, catching the liar totally off guard, while Gerald tells Emile that a deal is a deal no matter what, and she just blankly says she gets it. She grabs the property deed from a drawer and is totally ready to give it up, but right before she can hand the papers over, Shiro cuts her off and asks if she can buy something right this second. He holds up the killer bear hide, and the Jarl's eyes go wide the second he realizes just how rare that material is. Just by looking at the color, he realizes this hide is way rarer than he thought, and even though the merchant begs to buy it, Shuri turns him down because it's for the guild. Emile admits she's too broke for the supplies, but the girl tells her not to sweat it and just pay whenever she can. Lyra is totally touched by how kind Shiro is, so she decides to follow his lead and offers up the same materials herself. The warrior tells them they can just pay for the milk later. She stammers as she accepts both their favors, looking totally hyped and relieved. Gerald tries to lowball Emile with 32 gold coins for the hide, but she shuts him down instantly and demands 36, leaving the merchant sweating as he tries to decide if it's worth it. Once the deal was done, the guild's debt was totally wiped out, and Emil still had 26 gold coins left. Plus, he sold the bear parts for 2 more, leaving the Silver Moon Guild with a massive 28 gold coins. Gerald heads out with a smirk, telling everyone he's already hyped for their next big meeting. He warns Emile that he's down to his very last shot. The girl bows low, thanking him for totally having her back. The crew tells her she should really be thanking Shirov, since they were just doing what any pro adventurer would do. Lyre brings up the mission, and Emil totally freezes before turning to Shiro to ask if he's there for the same job. The guy just asks why he shouldn't be there, but Emil snaps and tells him to get lost since his business is finished. Liar starts arguing that the whole mission is about keeping him safe so he's not going anywhere, but the girl just waves him off and tells him to drop it so they can move on. The warrior corners her and asks if she spent all the mission cash, but she just stammers that she'd never do something like that. Liar demands the cash right now, and the whole squad insists on getting those 30 silver coins for the job. Shur is shocked by the high price, but Liar explains they can't charge peanuts for such a massive mission. Then the young guy speaks up and says the money isn't even the problem. He actually paid 100 silver coins and wants to know if the guild got billed for those extra 70. They're locked in a stare-down when Mill tries to slip away, but Liar catches her instantly and demands some answers. The sorceress summons a magic circle with her staff and threatens to roast the rabbit girl, while Kilfur just crosses her arms, looking totally annoyed with the whole thing. Even Rolf is giving off some seriously scary vibes. Liar snaps his fingers and tells her straight up that he's never forgiving her for what she did. The squad goes all out on the guild master, and he starts booking it to escape their rage, while Shuru finally lets out a huge sigh of relief. He's so relieved Aina isn't here right now, and feels lucky he stumbled onto this side of the mill. Shurdo finally makes it back to the shop, and Anna's face lights up as she stops cleaning the stairs to ask how his adventure went. He tells her it was absolutely insane and asks if. She gives him a big yes, and he starts breaking down everything that just happened. He says the last few days were a total nightmare, but Anna is super hyped and calls him a legend for taking down a literal killer bear. Shiro gets super embarrassed and tries to give all the credit to the Azure Flash group, saying he barely did anything, but the girl insists they'd be dead meat without him, right as someone starts pounding on the door and yelling his name. He swings the door open and boom, he's staring right at Karen. Before he can even blink, she pulls him into a massive hug and buries his face right in her chest. The mayor is crying and asking if he's okay after that crazy bear fight, but she's squeezing him so hard he starts to choke, until Inna tells her to back off so he can actually breathe. The mayor totally panics thinking his throat is crushed and lets go of Shuru so he can breathe, telling her to chill because the adventurers kept him safe, and once Karen feels relieved, she asks if they scored any epic loot during their mission with the Azure Flash. Shura says yeah, and if the shipment lands on time, the new gear is gonna blow everyone's minds, but the mayor just gives him this chill look and tells him to quit the act because he knows exactly what Shura is really up to. She leans in and whispers, asking if his storage power is actually a special item instead of just a skill. Shuru turns white as a ghost and tries to play dumb, but Karen just smirks and tells him he's a terrible liar since she's actually seen this rare power before and recognized it instantly. She keeps going, saying she could smell it on Shuru from the very first moment she saw him. With nowhere left to run, he finally admits she nailed it and asks if that was just her girl's intuition at work. The mayor laughs and says she was totally bluffing just to catch him, admitting she didn't actually know anyone else with his powers, but it was just way too sus that he had a massive stash of matches from the very beginning. Shore freezes for a second while his brain catches up, then he suddenly starts screaming in total shock. Karen just laughs and pats his shoulder, warning him that people in the business world will lie to his face and he's gotta guard his secrets better, so the guy admits he was totally careless and swears he won't let it happen again. Karen asks what new stuff she's planning to sell, and Honor admits she's dying to know too. Shuru gets all mysterious as he starts unrolling a secret item. The mayor is left totally stunned that this thing is actually real, and Karen heads out to stretch and celebrate after 3 straight days of crushing it. Right then, Liar walks into the shop to say hi to Shuru and see how business is going after the mission, while Neska follows right behind him with a friendly little wave. The warrior is totally hyped by how organized and fast the shop is, and he finds out Aina is the one who's been putting in all the work lately. Shuru watches them for a second and notices the sorceress shyly tugging on Liar's sleeve, and seeing them act like that makes him realize they're finally dating, which makes. Lyra brings up Emmy's tip about a big shot from the Adventurers Guild visiting town, and the merchant confirms the rumor is totally true. Liar hopes the guild is legit, but Shuru gets curious and asks if there are actually any sketchy ones out there. Liar confirms that even the strongest guilds can be total jerks, and while groups like Fang of the Venom Dragon and Devil's Trident are bad news, the Labyrinth Marauders are the absolute worst. Nesta nods along, but Anna looks totally blown away by the news. She realizes this is the exact guild Karen mentioned earlier, and as the room goes dead silent, Shuru asks the mayor if he knew about their shady reputation. Liar just fires back that maybe she didn't. Even for an adventurer, scoring intel in a tiny town like this is basically impossible. Since there are no phones or social media in this world, everyone is totally clueless, and he's low-key stressing about the guilt while just praying that Karen stays safe. Anna wonders if the guild rep got lost since he's taking forever, but Shura just shrugs it off and says he's probably just dragging his feet, even if those other city. Karen's been camping out at the city gates since yesterday, and when the kid says they hope he shows up soon, Shura is totally on the same page. Suddenly, the afternoon bell rings, letting Anna know work is over, so she gives him a super cheerful goodbye before heading out. Our guy looks at his keys, and even though it's still early, he decides to just call it a day and lock up the shop. Just as he's about to lock up, a knock hits the door, and standing there is a girl in a uniform with long hair and two swords who looks totally serious, but politely apologizes for being late and asks to see the item. Shurva tells her to go for it and flicks open a matchbox, and seeing how curious she is, he tells her she should give it a shot. Her eyes sparkle because she's heard how legendary this stuff is, and when she asks about another package, Shiro tells her it's a survival blanket that's way better at beating the cold than a regular one. He wraps the girl in the blanket, remembering how the mayor and all those adventurers were totally blown away the first time they saw it. She's amazed at how warm the thin blanket feels, and when she asks about the next gadget, Sheriff explains it's a folding water bottle and starts showing off even more cool stuff while she hangs on every word. She thanks him for the info but realizes she's super late, so she waves goodbye and bolts, leaving Shuru totally curious about her. A few days later, Ine bursts into the shop screaming for Shuru, and she looks so stressed out that he totally freezes and asks what's wrong. Karen is just walking through town when this random dude gets right in her face and asks if she's the mayor, looking super intense and scary. This guy claims he's an inspector from the Capitals Guild, and Karen immediately gets a bad vibe that something is seriously wrong. Shuru and Ine rush to the meeting spot, and even though Anna tells him the mayor needs him ASAP, and when he bursts into the Silver Moon Guild, he finds Karen, Mill, and the Azure Flash crew all waiting for him. Everyone looks dead serious, and as a mysterious guy stands with his back turned, Shuru wonders if he's finally found the inspector. Karen leans in and whispers that this guy is a total pain to deal with. She begs him to keep his cool even if the guy is a jerk, but Shiro notices the mayor is. She's trying to act tough, but you can totally hear the nerves in her voice as the mayor calls Shuru the pride of the whole city. Then he steps up and introduces himself right alongside Anna. Gavis sighs because he wanted a real pro, but the guy just glares at Aina and mocks her, calling her a total rookie brat. Aina's shaking in fear and Shuru. Gaba looks around the Silver Moon Guild and complains that the place is a total dump, muttering that these demi-humans can't even handle basic cleaning. Mel is absolutely fuming and snaps back that she spends every spare second cleaning up. The inspector just laughs in her face and asks if she's sure it's actually clean, while Karen watches him, absolutely fuming inside. Gavis keeps ranting that demi-humans who can't work don't deserve to live, and just as Kilfa and Emil are about to snap from anger, the mayor jumps in to change the subject by asking if he wants to check out Shiro's products. He stares at the matches, and for once, he actually looks like he's impressed. He says the gear is actually top tier, and Karen flashes him a super hopeful smile. Gabas just tosses his match on the ground, plops down like it's nothing, and announces he's opening a Labyrinth Marauders branch right here in the city. Karen's in total shock, while Emil chews him out for tossing a match inside the guild, but he just brushes it off like it's nothing. Then the inspector drops his demands. His guild is the only one allowed in the city, and everyone else has to shut down immediately. He looks right at them and asks what she has to say about that pathetic little guild, and when the rabbit girl tries to defend the name Silver Moon, Gaba just shuts her up and says the Mill is absolutely livid and tries to jump him, but Karen holds her back again while the inspector keeps yapping, demanding he pays zero taxes since this tiny town won't make any money and he needs the funds for a new guild. He demands to be the only one selling the matches, claiming Shiro's whole stock is his now as he tosses some boxes on the table with a cocky grin. Shiro just stares back totally confused, so Gavis leans in and asks if he's really a merchant or just a total moron. The inspector leans in close and tells them he's buying every single match in the entire shop. Karen tries to step in, but he just gives her a smug look and asks what her deal is. The mayor says she won't give them the exclusive deal, even if it helps the city grow, but Gabas just laughs at her for being so clueless. The guy explains that Ninoritch is way too far from the big cities to sell much, but his guild can get their stuff into every corner of the kingdom. That greedy grin says it all. This guy only cares about the money. Shiro crosses his arms and says the offer sounds cool, but he's not interested because he's low on stock and won't let one single guild buy out his entire shop. Karen sighs and tells them that now there's no way they can take the city branch. Gubba's face twists with pure rage as he suddenly snatches up a glass bottle. He blasts a wave of ice right at Karen, barely missing her by an inch, then screams about how powerful he is and how the guild is doomed, while Liar watches the whole thing with his blood. Shiro jumps in and tells them to hold on, explaining that the nearby forest is a total goldmine full of monsters and rare herbs that local adventurers use as their home base. Gabba bursts out laughing, steps right up to grab Shiro by the tie, and calls him a total moron. He calls the local adventurers total weaklings with zero potential, claiming they only moved here to avoid the big city competition and make some easy money. Nesca is absolutely fuming, but Liar signals her to chill out as her power starts to explode, making everyone in the room feel the heavy pressure. Gavis says the price is just insane, making the mayor and Mill absolutely furious. Then he corners Shiro to ask what his move is, since a new branch in Ninoritch would be a massive win for the city. The whole place's future is riding on Shiro, but when he asks for a moment to think, Gabas shuts him down because they're completely out of time. The inspector gives a nasty smirk and points right at Anna, telling Shiro that if he takes the deal, he can finally replace the kid with someone who actually knows what they're doing. The guy goes dead silent before coldly asking him to repeat that, and Gabas, thinking he's finally won him over, doubles down and says he'll replace that useless brat and those demihumans with some actual workers. Shiro finally snaps and lets out all his rage with a massive punch right to Gabba's face, sending him stumbling back as Shiro screams and rushes him while everyone watches in total shock. Right in the middle of the fight, Shira gets this crazy feeling that she's been here before. It's just like the day he quit his job after his boss kept picking on a rookie who looked up to him, until Shiro finally snapped. Gubba sounds exactly like the guy's old boss, right before he totally lost his mind. He lets out a huge yell and blasts the inspector with a punch that sends him flying through the air. The Azure Flash Squad is staring in total shock, and Amel looks like he's completely mesmerized by what's happening. Karen walks over and Shiro asks if Gabas did something weird to her, making the mayor totally freeze up in shock. Then Embarrass admits he touched her in a creepy way, and Shiro's face goes totally dark. He's absolutely fuming and grabs Jevis by the hair, but Karen begs him to stop because the fight is already over. Rolf the cleric steps in and calls out to the guy, but when Shur turns back, Rolf just offers to help, so he keeps right on dragging the inspector away. He remembers the move he pulled when he quit, and with Rolf's help, he grabs Gabas and slams him upside down right onto the guild's counter. The whole floor shakes like crazy from the force of that hit. The sheriff stands his ground, saying he hates fighting, but he won't let anyone disrespect his team or mess with the mayor, leaving Karen and Ine in total tears. The guy kicks Gabas again, telling him he's not nearly tough enough to keep his mouth shut through this. Anna rushes over and pulls him into a massive hug, her eyes totally full of tears. Gabais loses it on Kitsap, screaming that he's going to make the entire city pay. He starts bragging about being the manager of the Labyrinth Marauders to scare everyone, but Karen just shuts him down with a cold glare and asks if he's really trying to start a war with her city. The mayor warns that if things get messy, she's going straight to the ruler of Marcus Basher's territory. The inspector turns white as a sheet, stuttering like crazy while trying to take back everything he just said. The inspector promises to look the other way if he gets first dibs on the match sales, all while roughly yanking on the guy's ear. He tells him his ears are plugged up because he's having trouble hearing. The kid refuses to sell and warns the guy that if he tries anything, he'll wreck his entire guild while Karen and the crew watch, totally ready for a fight. Shur lets out a massive shout. He asks if he gets it, and Gavus Neal is straight up begging for a price. But the guy just fires back that he's gonna be way more careful about who he teams up with from now on. Gabba switches topics to try and cut a deal for the guild branch, but Karen just shrugs and shuts him down again. Liar starts cracking up, mocking Gabas for being so greedy that he ended up with absolutely nothing, which makes the inspector totally snap and scream at him to shut up while calling Liar a pathetic, weak adventurer. The warrior snatches him by the collar and warns him that he'd better keep his mouth shut. Shuru begs him to stop the fighting, but Lai just snaps back that the kid hit him first. McGibbs kicks him and tells him he's straight up worthless. The warrior points his finger right at the capital, and Gabas crawls away, absolutely fuming. Liar, Emil, and Rolf say that's just not enough, and they want way more. The mayor tells everyone to just chill and forget about it, then she looks over at Shuru hoping he's got her back. Suddenly, a loud knock hits the door, and Liar gets super annoyed thinking Gabba has already come back. He swings the door open and finds that girl from Shiro's shop, who asks to come in because she knew the mayor was there the whole time. We definitely recognize her, so Karen introduces herself and asks the girl who she is. The girl introduces herself as Ninoritch from the Fairies' Blessing Guild, and Liar's jaw drops because that's literally the biggest guild in the entire country. Karen asks them straight up why they even showed up. She flashes a grin and says she wants to open a brand new guild branch in Ninoritch. She looks totally locked in and tells them she's actually there to ask for a favor. Nay keeps her cool, but Karen is definitely suspicious, asking if she's really trying to. She suddenly spins around and grabs Emil's hands with glowing eyes, asking if she's part of the guild, and before the startled rabbit girl can even get a word out, Nay. Nye throws her hand up and promises a massive pay raise, making Mel's heart pound as she watches her every move. The rabbit girl's eyes go wide as she asks if. The mill jumps back on pure instinct to get away, but things are about to get way more intense. She drops to her knees right in front of Nye, her voice shaking as she announces that Silvermoon is officially joining Fairies' Blessing. She clings to Naya's legs and begs the mayor to let her have her way, while Karen stands there in total shock, unable to believe her ears, until the mayor finally decides to. The guy crosses his arms and says they should at least hear Nay's plan first, so Karen agrees and brings everyone to her office to talk it out. The mayor sipped his tea and asked Knight to explain why she made that choice. Nye reveals that some adventurers just found a dungeon with a map of a totally undiscovered continent, and he thinks it belongs to a lost ancient civilization. Finding a whole civilization that's this good at magic is easily the biggest deal of the century. She looks over at Shiro and Karen, and her face gets super serious. Now for the best part, the map shows ancient ruins and lost kingdoms hidden in the forest east of the city, so Nay rolls it out on the table and slams her hands down on it. Karen is totally stunned and asks if this is actually for real. Mega makes it clear that the labyrinth marauders were already eyeing the city because they want to hog all the ruins for themselves. She grabs a little figure and knocks it over to show how they failed, since they tried to force their way in but got totally shut down by the inspector's crazy demands. Mai smiles and explains that her guild isn't like the labyrinth marauders because they actually want to team up with the city to explore the ruins the right way. After checking everything out, they realized this city was the perfect spot for their mission, and it wasn't just because of the location. There was one huge reason they picked it. Sherwood asks why this city is such a big deal, and he finds out it's all because of the Silver Moon Guild, the only one in the entire region. If they can just take over the local guild and turn it into a Fairies' Blessing branch, they won't have to build anything new and can start exploring right away. Then they spotted Shiro's shop, and it totally caught his eye. His gear was totally insane and was going to be a massive game changer for their next big mission. She bows with a smile and asks Shiro to open a shop in the guild, but her intense stare is so serious it makes Karen gulp. The mayor smells something fishy, so she gets straight to the point and asks Nai what her price is for setting up the guild branch in town. The girl looks totally lost and super awkward, while Shiro explains the huge mess Gabus just caused. Nezai's jaw dropped at all those extra demands, even though he finally got the okay to open the guild branch. Shiro says the inspector was talking trash to him, and Karen reveals all the harassment she had to put up with. Gabus was a total scumbag, and while Nay was fuming over his actions, he told Karen not to worry because if Mill agrees, they won't even have to build anew. They're going to need a secure spot for these adventurers who are in deep debt. She promises the paychecks will be totally legit and all the city taxes will be handled properly. Karen takes. She reaches out with a small smile, saying she's stoked to work together, and the other girl shakes her hand with sparkling eyes, totally hyped and thanking her for the chance. Just like that, the Silver Moon Guild went from being totally broke to joining the biggest guild in the entire country. A few days later, Shiro's shop is still super busy, and he's right in the middle of serving a customer when he shouts for Anna to grab some big matches, but she's totally frozen and looks terrified, so he has to call her name again. When she doesn't answer, he leans right into her ear, making her jump as she spins around and asks if he needs the broom. Shiro is absolutely massive, and he keeps insisting that he needs those giant matches. Anna bolts to go get them, but she gets distracted again in like 2 seconds. He starts counting up his coins and notices she's totally zoned out. He calls out to her again, but when he sees her acting all hesitant, he asks if something's wrong. Aina looks down nervously, her tiny hands shaking like crazy. She can't even find the words as she drops to her knees, totally breaking down in tears. Her voice cracks as she cries about needing cash, and right then, a whole pile of coins just crashes onto the floor. Shur grabs her hands and looks totally relieved, asking her exactly how much she needs. Anna starts apologizing and says she didn't mean to cause trouble, but Shuri just gives her a warm look and a gentle head pat to let her know it's all okay. He flashes a smile and tells her everything's okay, saying she shouldn't worry because asking for help took a ton of guts and he really respects that. He asks if something happened with her mom, and Anna looks totally rattled. Just as she's about to answer, Lyra bursts in looking totally stressed and yells for Shuru to come eat. He takes one look at her face and immediately apologizes for barging in. Right after that, Karen walks in to talk about the city's progress, but she freezes and apologizes the second she sees what's going on. Lyra asks if they should just come back later, then she heads over to Ina to see what she thinks about it. The little Brule wipes her tears and says everything is totally fine, telling everyone they're welcome to stay. He flashes a grin at the group and decides they're all going to sit down, listen to her story, and help her out. Lyra thumps his chest and tells them to leave it to their team, since Rolf is a total pro at stuff like this. Karen steps up as the mayor too, telling Aina she can totally count on her if she ever runs into trouble. The little girl starts tearing up, and Shuru admits he just wanted to help her out. The girl finally chokes out the words through her tears, explaining that her mom was actually really sick. Right then, the girl's mom starts coughing like crazy back at the house. Suddenly, the flowers Aina just picked start to slowly wither away. Anna remembers being just 4 years old and living in a tiny house, totally happy with her mom and dad, where she'd always eat dinner right next to her favorite teddy bear. But everything flipped upside down when a massive war suddenly swallowed up their ocean home. Their cozy home was totally torched, her favorite toy was nothing but ash, and her mom just squeezed her tight to keep her safe. Out of the ruins, her dad appeared holding her dirty, worn-out teddy bear, and he looked absolutely devastated. Losing everything was a total nightmare, but the real gut punch for Aina was watching her dad get dragged off to war right after he gave her and her mom one last, super tight hug. He promised he'd be back soon and took off, leaving the two of them all by themselves. The war was over in just 6 months, but as the years flew by, Anna's dad never made it back home. When she hit 6, her mom told her they were moving, but she flat out refused because she was scared her dad wouldn't be able to find them when he finally came back. The mom saw her daughter's reaction and realized she couldn't say another word. He just pulled her into a hug, sobbing his eyes out and totally frozen because he had no idea what to do. They ditched the city and hiked across borders for days and nights until they finally hit Ninoritch. The little girl asks why they moved to this city, and her mom tells her it's because the war is finally over. She was done losing the people who actually mattered to her. Living in that border town was a total nightmare, and her mom was out there grinding in the fields every day, even skipping her own meals just so her daughter could eat until her body literally started breaking down. She ended up getting sick, and since her mom kept apologizing, Anna started feeling totally guilty for making her work so hard. She'd spend her nights crying on the floor with her teddy bear until she finally came up with a plan. She knew she had to grow up fast, so she ditched her toys and stared herself down in the mirror. She was totally locked in on selling flowers, and after saving up every bit of cash for a city permit, she spent every single day from sunrise to sunset hustling through the market with her basket. Then one day she ran into Shuru, and the second she saw him, she was totally hooked. He got her some flowers and even hooked her up with a brand new job. This let Anna finally give her mom a better life, and seeing her so comfortable made her the happiest girl alive. The little girl thanked every god she could think of and sent up a huge prayer to show how grateful she was. Aina just got her first 10 silver coins, and she already knew exactly what she was gonna spend them on. She raced through the market until she tracked down the adventurer who once told her he had a potion that could cure literally anything. She didn't even hesitate to blow her whole paycheck on that potion and gave it to her mom, lying that it was from Shuru, but their high hopes quickly turned into a total let. She downed every last drop in the bottle, but her mom didn't get better at all. Anna started freaking out, and her vision went totally blurry. The only thing she could think about was finding a way to save her mom from that sickness. She realized she needed to stack some serious cash, because with enough money, she could finally get what she wanted. She could get her mom to a massive city where they might finally have a way to save her. Aina tracked down Shuru, praying that even if he totally hated her guts, he'd still agree to save her mother's life. She dug deep and found every last bit of courage she had. She asked Shuru for some cash, totally ready for him to judge her and act like he was better than her. To her shock, he wasn't mean at all and just gave her a soft head pat, making Aina feel totally safe for the first time in forever. After catching every single word that was just said, he took a deep breath, looking like he finally got the picture, while Anna just stared at the floor with her shoulders shaking from the sadness. The room went totally silent for a second, but then Liar slammed his fist into the wall, cracking the bricks as he roared, demanding to know who the total jerk was that sold that potion to Ina. He's shadowboxing in a total rage, swearing he'll destroy whoever tricked that little girl and beat them 100 times over, but Neska shuts him up by whacking him on the. He dropped the news that the potion she gave her mom doesn't actually cure anything, and the little girl just looked up at him totally lost, asking what he was talking about. The cleric broke it down for them, explaining that heal potions only fix cuts on the outside, while cure potions are strictly for stopping poison. But here's the thing, no potion can actually cure a disease, and as Aina stood there totally confused, she insisted that the soldier promised the drink would make her mom all better. Rolf sighed and hung his head, apologizing because that adventurer totally lied and sold her a fake item. Then he slowly repeated the cleric's words to make sure she really got it. The second the truth hit her, she burst into tears, making his heart ache just watching her, while Liar flew into a rage and started taking out everything around him. He didn't even realize his own power and accidentally smashed the window to pieces, screaming at the top of his lungs that he was gonna hunt that jerk down and make him pay, so he told Rolf to handle the mess, while Neska and Kulfad decided to gear up and go with him. He was dead set on hunting down the criminal, while the rest of the crew headed to Anna's place to check on her mom. Shiru follows right behind the girl with a super serious look, his mind totally stuck on the scary stuff she told him about the disease. Karen gets super quiet after the pharmacist calls it a ruined life disease, and she finally realizes just how serious this whole mess actually is. While they keep walking, Shiru pulls Rolf into a corner to secretly ask him about the disease. Rothan explains that your body slowly gets weaker, like your limbs are literally rotting away until you have zero strength left. A bunch of experts tried to figure out how it spreads, but After walking for a bit, Anna points to a tiny house, and it's honestly wild that this little girl leaves this remote place every single day just to sell flowers for her mom, so Anna takes. She bursts through the door with a massive smile, sounding super hyped as she pulls Shiru inside to meet her mom. The lady lying on the bed looks up at the guy with a super kind look in her eyes. Even though she's super weak, she forces herself to sit up and says her name is Stella, whispering a big thank you to Shiru for looking after her daughter. He quickly tells her that he's actually the one who should be thanking her, while Stella tries to force herself up despite being super weak and apologizes for her messy outfit. Anna and Shiru freak out and tell her to stop pushing herself since her health is way more important, but even though the lady argues that it's rude to greet guests while lying down, Anna insists. Stella looks totally stressed out and asks why the mayor even showed up, but Rolf just keeps it cool and says they heard about the drama with Amos and had to check it out personally, so Stella sighs and says she's sorry for making everyone worry and come all the way to her place. Karen shakes her head and says she's actually the one who should apologize, because as the mayor, she felt totally useless for not being able to help everyone. She looks totally frustrated and full of regret, and even though Stella's not from that town, she really respects seeing it. Mom turns to her daughter and asks when she became besties with the mayor and why she kept it a secret, but Aina's eyes light up as she reveals she's also friends with Shur. Plus, Liar, Kulfa, and Neska were there too, and they were total pro-adventurers, so Stella gave her daughter a sweet look and asked if she was stoked to have so many friends. The little girl didn't even hesitate, flashing a massive smile and saying she was super happy. Stella's heart totally melts seeing her daughter so happy, and Aina even asks if she's eaten yet before offering to whip up some soup for their guests. Stella offers to handle the cooking, but Emma shuts her down, insisting she wants to do everything herself since she loves being in the kitchen. She says she's heading to the river to grab some water, and Rolf quickly offers to tag along. Stella watches the drama for a second, makes her choice, and asks Karen to step outside with her. She pulls Shiru aside for a private chat, and once they're alone, he just waits for her to speak until Stella finally gets serious and reveals she actually needs a favor from Anna. She looked him dead in the eye and asked. She asked him to look after her daughter if things ever went south for her. Shiru is totally speechless after that curveball question, and while Stella apologizes for being so pushy, she knows her time is running out and she's desperate to protect Anna's future, so she sadly asks if he already knows about the girl's sickness. Shura nods and the mom asks if her daughter cried during the talk, but Shura admits Aina was already sobbing before she even started, making Stella close her eyes and take a shaky breath as her worst fears finally come true. She saw how hard her daughter was grinding to keep them both alive since she couldn't work anymore, and it totally crushed her to be a mom who couldn't do a single thing for her own kid. It crushed Stella to see Anna faking a smile just to keep her from worrying, but lately, she's noticed the little girl is acting totally different. Anna looked like she was having a blast while they talked, so her mom finally got curious and asked her daughter why she was so hyped up. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she shouted that she was so hyped to finally have such a kind big brother. Right then, everything clicked for Stella, and looking at Shuru, she realized he looked exactly like Anna's dad. The moment he stepped through that door earlier, she got this super weird vibe that something was totally off. The guy who left is finally back. Sherba felt a heavy weight in his chest and apologized for being the one there instead of Inna's real dad, but Stella just gave a small smile and told him to stop because that wasn't even the point. All she really wanted to say was that she felt super happy. Just having him around helped her finally remember her husband's face, and seeing him again, after almost forgetting, gave her so much comfort. Tears filled her eyes and her voice started shaking as she realized she'd find her husband way faster when her time finally came. Shiru's eyes went wide as he asked what she meant, but Stella just sighed and calmly told him that her body was failing and she was officially running out of time. She struggles to her feet and looks him right in the eyes, begging him to look after Aina once she's gone, because even though Aina acts all tough and brave, she's actually just a scared little girl who needs someone to help her keep moving forward. But before she could even finish her sentence, Stella's body suddenly went weak and she started to collapse. She moved in a total flash, lunging forward to catch her right before she hit the ground. They both just froze and stared at each other, feeling super awkward because they were suddenly way too close. He asked if she was doing all right, and a totally out of it Stella just gave a tiny nod as he helped her back onto the bed, but right then, something weird caught his eye. He actually asks if he can touch her foot for a second, and she turns bright red right away. Her face turned bright red, and her heart started pounding like crazy. Even though she was dying of embarrassment, she closed her eyes and agreed without knowing why, while Shiru watched her closely for a few seconds. He just proved that he was totally right all along. Stella opens her eyes totally confused and asks what he means, but then she gets all shy and asks if he's into her legs, making Sherry choke and turn bright red as he panics and says it's not like that at all. He was finally starting to figure out what caused the sickness and why his life was a total wreck, and he might even have a plan to fix it. Stella's eyes shot wide open in total shock. She was totally stunned and couldn't believe what she just heard. Up until that moment, she didn't even think a cure was possible. Before she could even stop herself, she just broke down and started crying. She was sobbing because, deep down, she really didn't want to die. She couldn't stand the thought of. Shura grabbed her hands tight and promised she wasn't going to die, telling her she'd definitely get to live with Ine once he figured out a plan. Right then, the door bursts open and Karen pops in to ask if they're finished, with Anna and Rolf following right behind her. But the second they saw what was happening, their jaws dropped because Shiro was holding Stella's hands with a totally serious look on his face. Karen and Rolf are totally speechless, just staring at the guy, while Shiro freezes up and panics because he has no clue how he's gonna explain this mess. It was honestly impossible to explain what was going on, especially with Karim giving off a scary vibe, while Rolf stood there ready for a fight with his weapons out. Aina was totally lost and asked what was going on, so Stella wiped her eyes and broke down the whole situation. Shuro was so relieved Stella cleared the air because things could have gone south fast, so he cleared his throat to get his head straight and told them that back home, this ruined life. He explained the sickness was just from missing some super important vitamins. If it gets really bad, your arms and legs go totally numb until you can't even move, but the fix was actually crazy easy. Anna's face totally lit up as she asked if there was a medicine to save her mom, and Shiru just smiled and told her yes. He remembered his grandma's words about always stepping up to help anyone in trouble. He was totally locked in, so he used his alchemy to flip his cash into yen and rushed out to get that medicine. A bit later, he shows back up with a bottle of pills and starts breaking it all down for Stella. Even though it looked super sketchy, this medicine was the real deal, and the mayor and cleric stared at the bottle like they'd never seen anything like it before. Stella was worried about the price, but Shur just smiled and said her grin already paid the bill, so Stella didn't even try to argue. But the guy stood his ground and wasn't backing down. He tells her that Aina helped him out a ton when he first got to town, so now it's his turn to pay her back as he hands over the pill and water, which Stella swallows with tears of hope in her eyes. A whole month flies by, and the bell rings to kick off a brand new day. Aina and Shiru finally made it back home, and the second she swung the door open, her mom was right there waiting for her. The little girl's eyes popped when she saw her mom standing up, and she immediately asked if she was feeling better, while Stella just smiled and said she was actually shocked by how great she felt. Aina rushes over and asks if they can have a sleepover just like the old days, and after a bit of hesitation, Stella finally says yes. And just like that, they started sleeping together every single night. Mom and daughter pull each other into a super tight hug, crying happy tears together. Anna broke down in tears as her mom held her close, apologizing for the scare and promising they'd never be apart again. Shiro watched them with a huge smile, feeling so hyped that they finally got to live in peace, and he just knew his grandma would be super proud of him for saving a life. Later that night, our guy was just chilling on his balcony. He chilled with a drink and thought about everything that just went down, realizing that day was absolutely wild. Stella is 100% better thanks to those vitamins, and now Anna can finally talk to her mom. They'd just pick flowers and play without a care, and you could tell the little girl was getting way healthier since her happy energy was totally rubbing off on everyone. And get this, the Silver Moon Guild was officially made a branch of the Blessing of the Fairies. Just like that, the Azure Flash group started working for the main guild, heading deep into the woods to scout things out. Shiro couldn't stop thinking about his massive payday since he'd already banked 50 million yen in just 2 months, and he realized if he kept this up for a year. He was finally chilling out when Karen suddenly popped up behind him, scaring him so bad he almost dropped his drink, but she just gave him a smile and said good night. He's still totally freaked out and complaining that his heart almost stopped, but the mayor just laughs it off, says sorry, and asks what he's drinking. Shirev told her the drink was a special treat from his home and asked if she wanted a glass, and Karen was totally down for it. They were both chatting away and having a blast with their drinks when the mayor suddenly asked to pat the guy's head, but before he could even give an answer. She pulled him close and rested his head right on her lap, and when Shiro tried to complain, Karen reminded him that he's the one who said he gets soft when people praise him. The mayor told him to shut up while she started getting touchy, so he asked if she did way too much to drink. Karen gave him a warm smile and said she was honestly just so happy he came to this city. She told him it wasn't a reward, but if he ever needed a favor, he shouldn't be shy about asking. Sheriff stood up and told them it was no big deal, since he was just doing what he could. Karen watched him for a second and said she totally got it since he didn't seem greedy at all. He got all flustered and told her to stop acting like he was a good guy, shouting that he's actually super greedy and only cares about money. Right then, he remembered his grandma's #1 rule: always step up and help anyone who's in trouble. Karen smiled and said his grandma sounded like a total legend. Then she asked what her name was. Sherwood pauses for a second before revealing his grandma's name is Arisago Amio, and when Karen says it back, her eyes go wide like she just realized something massive. Out of nowhere, she grabs the guy and starts shaking him like crazy, asking if he's the grandson of the immortal witch Arisu, which totally shocks Shiro as he asks if the mayor actually knows his grandma. Karen dropped a major truth bomb. Everyone knows the legendary immortal witch, but almost no one has actually seen her face, and Karen's not one of the lucky few, which just left Shiro even more confused than before. Karen told him she actually met Eris at last year's Harvest Festival, when the witch just randomly showed up out of nowhere to drink and dance right in the middle of town. The guy thought that was impossible since his grandma had vanished 7 years ago. But before he could even get a word in, Karen totally snapped, shouting that she remembers the witch gathering star fragments to forge a magic sword named Mel Gibson. Shiro had to take a second just to wrap his head around all that crazy info. That sword's name actually triggered a huge flashback to when he was just a little kid. You suddenly remember seeing a poster of a massive movie star back at his grandma's place. When he asked who the guy was, she told him it was her favorite actor and even gave the picture a kiss. Karen was still totally blown away that Shura's grandma was that witch, but it finally clicked why he always had those weird medicines and mystery items on him. She asked if he'd finally found his grandma, but Sherwood told her he hadn't seen her in 7 years. Then he immediately headed for the balcony to take a deep breath. He screamed at the top of his lungs that his grandma was actually still alive. Shura makes it back to his grandma's house and just sits on the floor staring at her photo, completely blown away that she's actually still alive. His head is spinning as he looks at the photo of the grandma, who always threw up a peace sign without a care in the world, so he takes a deep breath to pull himself together. He takes one last look at the photo, totally sure he'll find her at the Harvest Festival. Then Determini stands up and steps through the portal back to the other world. While talking to Karen yesterday, he found out his grandma wasn't just some quirky old lady. She was actually a legendary, world-famous witch. The mayor thought about the missing lady and told Shiro she totally gets why he's in a rush, but he should really stick around Ninoritch since his grandma showed up right at the harvest festival last. Shiro was blown away realizing that if it happened once, it could definitely happen again, and since his grandma loves festivals, she'll probably show up this year. Karen told him he was totally right, and since the city was turning 120, she was already planning a massive anniversary bash as the mayor and wanted him to help out. A few weeks flew by, and Shiro realized the big event was only 2 months away, so since he's a total festival fan, he didn't even think twice about saying yes to Karen. Now he was totally stuck on what to do, since food stalls felt way too basic and regular festival games were already going to be everywhere anyway. He sat there for a while, totally stuck because every single thought led back to food, so he started rubbing his head in frustration, desperately trying to dig up some old childhood memory that could actually help him out. A genius idea suddenly popped into his head, so he grabbed a bunch of cameras and rushed straight to the store. She stared at the gear with a confused frown and asked what it was, but Shura just smirked and told her that was a great question. He hyped them up as cameras he was gonna sell as a new product, but the little girl was still totally lost. He saw she wasn't buying it, so he decided to just prove it by telling Ayanan to look his way and snapping a quick photo. He shows the picture to the little girl, and Aina's eyes go totally wide in pure shock. She was totally confused, asking how it even got inside the paper and if it was trapped in there being super small. Shiro laughed and asked if she was shocked, explaining that his new item could instantly turn people and the whole world into paintings, and he figured this was the perfect time to test it out. He told Aina to flash a big smile while he snapped a bunch of photos of her. The little brother was totally obsessed with the shots and begged to learn how to use the camera himself. After fumbling around a bit, Aina finally managed to snap a photo of Shiro, and when he told her it looked awesome, she got so hyped that she wanted to take 1,000,000 more. The guy jumped right into the fun and started hitting some epic poses. He snapped a few photos, but then he just stopped and said he was done. Aina points to another camera and asks what it is, so Shirv explains it's a Polaroid, and while she's totally blown away by all the different models, he gives her a. The second she turned around, he snapped a quick photo and joked that he totally caught her off guard. The little girl looked at the photo and complained about looking super weird, but then she got a sudden idea and called out for Shiro. The second he turned around, she snapped another Polaroid and laughed, telling him it was finally her turn to catch him off guard, while he just smirked and asked if she was trying to get even. But check out the photo where he's flashing a peace sign. He looked at the picture and realized he was basically a clone of his grandma. Right then, Stella walks into the shop and thanks Shiro for looking after her daughter all day. He flashed a smile and asked if she was liking the new place or if the move totally wiped her out, but Stella said she felt great thanks to his help, especially since Shiro hooked her and her mom up with a sweet apartment right next to the shop. Anna jumps at the chance to spill some tea, joking that her mom was a total disaster at organizing, which makes Stella super embarrassed as she speaks up. She was told to stop talking like that, but Shiro just laughed and promised he'd always have their back. Aina felt super awkward, but she still managed to give him a quick thank you. He joked that he was also a total mess at organizing, leaving Shuri speechless as he scratched his head and apologized, which finally made the little girl smile at him. She gave one last wave and said her final goodbye. Shuri waved back with a big smile, looking totally peaceful as she watched the two of them head off. The Silver Moon Guild just officially joined the ranks of the super powerful fairy Blessing Guild. Shiro remembered his first visit when the only sound was someone sobbing behind a desk, but as he steps inside now, the whole vibe has totally flipped. A bunch of adventurers were hyped up, trading secrets about what's hidden in the forest. He couldn't believe that this guild was literally about to close 2 months ago, but now it's one of the busiest spots in the whole kingdom. Emil spotted him, caught his eye, and rushed right over. She teased him about only showing up to see her, and while petting Shiro, she gave a sneaky grin and asked if he'd brought her a super expensive gift. Shiro told her to knock it off, but she just kept on messing with him. She told him she'd totally marry him to live the rich life, already picturing herself in a massive castle, riding dragons, and tossing gold to the crowds, but Sheriff shut her down instantly. Emil didn't even flinch, bragging that he could do whatever he wanted with her since she's actually super affectionate, but as she started unbuttoning her shirt, Shiro completely lost. Amel just gives him a sneaky grin and says she's taking a break, then suddenly pins Shiro against the wall and asks him to go drink in a dark room, but he just He snatched her hand and tried to get away, remembering exactly what his grandma taught him. Never stay alone in a dark room with a girl who can't handle her drinks. He just found out his grandma was actually alive, but the other adventurers just laughed and teased him for trying yet again. The bunny girl just played dumb, smirking as she joked that Shiryu was grabbing her hands so hard that if she hadn't shoved him, he would have dragged her straight to a dark room. She leaned in even closer, telling Shiryu that no matter how much he denied it, she knew he secretly wanted her. Shiryu started breaking out in a cold sweat as she tried to go in. Kilfa the scout lands a perfect kick that sends the rabbit girl flying straight into a wooden barrel. Shiryu cheered that the crazy octopus trap was finally toast, and when Kilful checked to see if he was okay, the kid just nodded through happy tears and said he was totally fine. Back at the guild bar, the adventurers were having a total blast, clinking their mugs and cheering together. Shiro thanked Kilfa for saving his skin from Emil, and the cat girl explained that rabbit people get way more hyper whenever there's a full moon. Emil tries to deny everything, but Neska the sorceress feels bad for Shuru and calls their relationship totally toxic. Then Rolf jokes that Emil almost got a taste of the forbidden fruit, and the squad spun around in total shock, asking how she was even still there, but Emil just shrugged and said she hated being left out. Then suddenly, loud screams started echoing all through the hall. These two adventurers were totally losing their cool. The rest of the group was getting super hyped and placing bets on who'd win, but Shiro suddenly stood up and told them they had to shut the fight down. Liar just laughed it off, saying adventurers fight like they're saying hello, but since the whole town was feeling super tense lately, the guy asked what the deal was. Liar explained that the forest mission was a massive deal, bringing in the absolute best adventurers from every corner of the kingdom. 2 whole months of searching and they still haven't found a single ruin, but while they're talking, a masked fighter lashes out with a whip and his opponent barely dodges before firing back with a perfect kick. Shiryu realized everyone was totally wiped out, and Liar backed him up. Since there was nothing to do in that tiny town, everyone was just getting more and more fed up. This guy hiding under the table pokes Shiryu and begs her to stop flashing everyone, so she pouts and promises she'd never do that with so many people watching. She flashed a sneaky grin and said this was the distraction Liar was talking about, but Shiryu still had no clue what was going on. The guy laughed at how clueless he was because she was obviously talking about brothels, making Liar turn bright red as he panicked and tried to deny it. Emil kept pestering him about why he was so rattled, but then Neska crushed Liar's foot with her heel to stop his nonsense while he scrambled to explain himself. But the sorcerers just pushed down even harder, making the warrior scream his lungs out. The adventurers finally finished their big fight, and that's the exact moment I walked right through the door. Her massive aura totally took over the room as she gave them a sharp look and asked what was really going on. Everyone fighting stopped dead in their tracks and immediately swore they weren't even doing anything. They saw Shiryu and apologized for barging in, but Shiryu was just stunned by how cool she looked. Then they spotted Emil hiding under the table and called her out. The rabbit girl felt a cold shiver shoot straight down her spine. May flashed a creepy smile and asked why she just stood there watching the fight instead of stopping it, and when she tried to explain, May totally shut her down because she wasn't in the mood for excuses. She didn't waste a second and hauled Emil outside, while the rabbit girl screamed for Shiryu to save his future wife, begging me for any punishment as long as it wasn't a. He said they were out looking for ruins in the forest when they suddenly stumbled onto some super rare flowers. The whole squad huddled up to break down the mission plan and fill everyone in on Shiryu. He was totally hyped to join the squad, and even though Liar asked if he was for real, he said he was down as long as they kept him safe. The warriors just smirked with total confidence, bragging that they were way stronger than before, and just like that, everyone smashed their mugs together for one more toast, cheering and celebrating with pure joy. A soft breeze rolls through the field, and Shiryu is totally mesmerized by the endless sea of flowers, making you smile as he talks about how these blooms are just on another level. Neska, the Roop's sorceress, checks out the flowers and explains they're rare apsaras that only grow in the cleanest water, making them super valuable for crafting high-level healing potions. After the talk, the group kicks back on the flower carpet to catch their breath before heading back out. Shiryu looks up at the clouds and sighs, really wishing Ina was there to see. Across the field, Liar crosses her arms and gives the trio a look that says she's totally not happy with them. The warrior jokes that he totally expected Neska and Kulfa. Liar totally brushes off the excuse and tells them to finish the job before sunset so they can finally chill without any stress. The squad picked up this quest a week ago right after the Azure Flash Guild found those rare flowers. During the trip, they realize these Apsara plants are the key ingredient for making hai. But there was one massive catch. On the trip back, the flowers totally withered and lost their powers, and even though Nesca tried using water and magic to save them, nothing worked, leaving the crew ready to give up on the mission. Liar came up with a genius plan and immediately hit up Shuru for some backup. This guy has an insane storage power that lets him carry tons of gear with zero weight, and since time literally stops inside his pocket dimension, everything he stashes stays fresh forever. Liar says they've got enough flowers for the day, but then she notices Kilfa's been totally passed out the whole time, and just as she's about to wake her up, the cat hears a weird noise and her face goes completely serious. She gets dead serious and warns them that something's coming, so everyone instantly grabs their weapons and gets ready for a fight. Suddenly, a swarm of massive rhinoceros beetles fills the sky, and these things look totally terrifying. Shiru's eyes go wide when she sees how massive these bugs and wires are, and she quickly counts 17 of them, which is definitely not a good sign. Liar steps up and tells everyone. Nesca figures out those wounds were caused by a wind-cutting spell, and their cleric Rolf points out the bug guts are still dripping, meaning the attack just happened. They barely had time to wonder what crushed those bugs before Lyriel screamed that the beetles had already found them. She's got no choice left, so she tells Rolf to guard Shuru while Nesca starts charging a spell, and the sorceress yells back that she's already one step ahead. She moves in a total blur and blasts a massive fire arrow right from her staff. The blast knocks those bugs down and they burn up on the ground, while Rolf jumps in front of Shuru and warns that he won't let anything touch him. Kilfa hurls a bunch of sharp knives at the beetles, but she's shocked when they just bounce right off without leaving a scratch. Before she can even move, she's totally surrounded by a swarm of bugs. He's screaming at the top of his lungs, begging Nesca to help him. The sorceress keeps her cool, charges up a fresh spell, and lets loose an even crazier fire blast. After blasting a few more enemies, Shura realizes these bugs are weak to fire and gets a crazy idea, suddenly bolting away and leaving Rolf totally stressed out. The cleric screams at him to stop being reckless, yelling that his bear spray won't do a thing to these monsters, but Shuru just grins and says he's got a totally. The guy pulls a lighter from his pocket and sparks it against a spray can, making a massive blast of fire. The fire blasts through the air and turns the beetles into ash in seconds, and even though Shuru just used a crazy homemade flamethrower, he warns his friends that it's way too dangerous to ever try at home. Liar is totally hyped and asks if that was magic, but Shearer immediately signals Rolf to take out one of the last bugs. The cleric doesn't wait a second and swings his massive mace, completely smashing through the monster's hard shell. There were only 6 enemies left standing. Liar stays positive and claims they were just about to win, but right at that second. The beetles swarm together and charge straight for Nesca, while Shura gets his homemade flamethrower ready for round 2. But he realizes the sorceress is way too close to those bugs, and if he fires his flames, she's gonna get caught in the blast, but before he can even think. One of the beetles lunges right at Nesca, but Shuru rushes in and shoves her out of the way just in time. He jumps in to save her and takes the hit, letting that bug sink its claws right into his body. Lair screams for Shuru to dive into the river and shake that thing off, so with no other options, he takes the plunge. The plan actually works, and the beetle lets him go, but now he's getting swept away by the crazy current. Nesca called on the water spirits to shield the guy and keep him safe. Liar starts freaking out the second he sees Shuru getting pulled toward the riverbank. The Azure Flash leader swears they'll find him and just hopes Shuru can wait up for them. Shiro slowly starts to wake up, wondering if his friends are actually coming to save him. Out of nowhere, a girl's voice screams for him to hang in there as Sherbakov hacks up a ton of water, and she's totally hyped that he's actually alive. The guy is totally stunned, but she cuts him off mid-sentence, asking if he's seriously never heard of the fairy before. Sherba is totally bugging out, asking if she's a legit fairy since he's never seen one before, while this tiny girl with long hair and glowing wings hovers gracefully right in front. She gets all flustered and tells him to stop staring, so Sheru quickly apologizes, but then she crosses her arms and waits for him to say something while he just stands there looking totally clueless. He tries to play it cool and says it's a pleasure to meet her, but the fairy just sighs in total frustration. She shakes her head and asks who he thinks pulled him out of that waterfall, because without her, he'd be nothing but fish food by now. As soon as he hears that, Shuru realizes the truth and immediately bows his head to show some real respect. She stands there with her hands on her hips, asking why he's hanging out in the river like it's some weird hobby, but he quickly shuts that down, saying it's a long story and everything went down way too fast, so she just shakes her head and admits that getting jumped by monsters is actually super dangerous. She starts roasting him for being weak and asks where he's from, so Shuri tells her he's from a tiny town to the west called Ninoritch. Her eyes go wide with shock as she repeats the name, Norwich. She asks him to take her to the human town, and he's totally caught off guard, asking why she's so curious and if she's ever even been there before. The fairy pouts and asks if that's a no, so the sheriff scratches his head and says he'll take her, but first he needs to know if she knows anyone in town, and she just grins, saying she's actually got a human friend there. She's super hyped as she describes him, saying he's a bit taller than Shuru with a cool smile and hair, and eyes that match the color of the sky. She's super hyped to see if Shuru knows the guy, but he reminds her that just because they're both human doesn't mean they've met, then asks what his name is. The tiny fairy gets all quiet and shakes her head, admitting she has no clue because before meeting Shuru, that guy was the only human she'd ever run into, so she just called him Kamen. Shuri thinks back and realizes he could have totally been a hunter or even an adventurer. He teases her for sounding so romantic and asks if they were dating, but she just bops him on the head and asks if he's actually stupid. She says there was no way a fairy and a human could ever date, so they were just really close friends. Shur smiles and says they must be best friends, and the fairy doesn't even hesitate to say they totally were. He stops for a second to ask if she knows the area, and the fairy says totally, since she was actually born and raised right here in the Guyana forest. He sees a massive chance here and offers her a deal. If she leads him through the forest, he'll take her straight to Ninoritch, and he asks if she's down. The fairy's eyes light up with pure joy as she asks if he's actually for real about taking her to the city. She says yes without a second thought, promising to keep Shuru safe and telling him to just watch how she fights. She raises her hand and unleashes a wind cut so powerful it literally knocks down the trees around them. Shiru's eyes popped wide open when he saw how insane her attack really was. He asks if she really had to go that far, but the fairy just puts her hands on her hips and says she's not great at controlling her magic, though it doesn't matter since she's totally overpowered anyway. She flexes her muscles to show off her power and brags about scaring away a swarm of rhino beetles all on her own, making Shura realize she was the one who actually wrecked those bugs as. Shiro reaches out his hand and reminds her they have a deal, and after he tells the fairy his name, she thinks it's totally weird but rolls with it, finally introducing herself as Patty Folly Lou. Shiro grins and says he's her commander now, but Patty pouts and tells him he better start calling her Chief instead. The guy laughs and plays along by calling her Chief, and Patty is so happy she asks him to say it one more time. She shouts sure and calls for her chief, making the fairy get so hyped that it starts spinning in circles around him. Shiri watches her reaction and asks if she liked that chief, but Patty just gets annoyed and asks why he's talking so weirdly, so he mumbles that's just how sidekicks talk, but Patty tells him she hated it and he needs to stop right now. He asks if he should call her captain, but she shuts that down fast, so Shura starts teasing her by calling her Milady and swearing to be her loyal servant since she saved him, but she's totally not into that either. Meg wipes out and they start a campfire, where Patty stares at the flames and asks Shuru if he misses his crew. He looks up at the stars and says, "Of course I do," because they're his squad, and he knows they're probably out there looking for him right now. Patty is super hyped and decides she's totally down to help him find his friends. Shuru asks if she's for real, but the fairy tells him that as his boss, it's her job to handle everything, so he just needs to trust her. Then she asks if he's hungry. Shura realizes he's been starving all day, so Patty puts her hands on her hips and tells him that since he's her subordinate, she's gonna get him some food. Out of nowhere, a blinding light hits his eyes, and once Shuru can see again, he's totally stunned while Patty asks if he's okay or just not hungry, but She pulls a piece of fruit right out of the portal with a cheeky grin while Shuru just stares at her, totally blown away. The fairy tilts her head and asks if he's seriously nevers. He's about to ask a question, but the fairy beats him to it, acting all proud as she explains that almost every fairy has the exact same power. It's basically a magical inventory where. She finally grabs a tiny glowing bottle of golden liquid, and with a sneaky grin, the fairy offers Shuru a sip of her own special brew. She's super confident it'll. He's blown away by how good the mead tastes, and Patty flexes because she made it herself, telling Shuru to drink up since she's got a massive stash waiting. Hattie gets a super serious look on her face and promises to stay on lookout all night. Then she basically orders Shuru to finish his drink and get some sleep, and since it doesn't even put up a fight, just shuts its eyes and totally gives in to the rest. The next morning, Patty is literally chilling on the guy's head when he wakes up, and she immediately starts giving him the lowdown on all the crazy races living in the forest. She warns him. Shiro tries to pay attention, but he eventually just sighs and asks for a break because his legs are totally dead from all that walking. The fairy crosses her arms and complains about him stopping again, but she finally gives in as long as they make it quick. While they're chilling, Petty spots a weird flower and explains it's a babunia, warning him that the nectar tastes totally gross, which leaves Shiro looking super confused while the fairy just keeps. Patty tells him she once accidentally drank some nasty nectar and hated the gross taste, making Shiri realize she's always yapping about random facts, like how this whole area used to be. The whole nation eventually crumbled, and over hundreds of years, a massive forest swallowed up the ruins and became known as the Forest of Ginna. The guy frowns and asks if this all happened back in the ancient magic era, but Patty just snaps at him, saying she has no clue since it all went down way before she was even born. Shiro just sighs and stops arguing, but suddenly she goes totally serious as she senses something creepy nearby and tells him to hide right now without asking any questions. Just as they're about to move, they hear voices screaming Shiro's name from deep in the woods. It's the Azure Flash crew out there searching for him. Rolf shouts out to see if Shiro can hear them, while Lyra looks totally panicked, and he even starts getting all emotional saying he'd be crushed if Shiro died, but Nesca suddenly whacks him with her staff for being such a downer. The warrior wipes his eyes and pulls himself together, swearing that Shiro is still alive, so Nesca gives him a gentle head pat and tells him he's right while Hilfa sprints through. The second Shiro recognizes his friend's voices, he bolts upright, completely ignoring Patty as she calls him a moron for blowing his cover so fast. Shira tells her not to worry because those guys are his best friends, and then he screams out to them that he's finally here. They all turn to look at him, but then they realized Kilfa was gone. Their scout had literally been snatched away by a bird. But the second she catches sight of him, everything changes. She smashes the bird, breaks free, and starts falling right toward him. The cat drops down and smacks Shiri right in the face, making the whole squad wonder what that loud thud was. Kilful starts crying her eyes out and grabs him in a huge hug, telling him she totally thought he was dead. She starts showering him with kisses and swears she's never letting him go, and even though the whole group bows to Shiro, he just tells them he's totally fine and to look up. Lyre felt super guilty and apologized for failing to protect him like he promised, but Nesca reminded him that he'd already saved her life twice and she was definitely going to pay him back. It shows everyone he's totally fine and back with his crew, which is the only thing that matters, even if they try to complain. The guy cuts them off to ask if they were actually friends, making Lyre stutter that they were while Kilfa calls their leader a total moron, and they both start laughing their heads off at him. Rolfin is super impressed that Shira made it back solo, but Shira admits he wasn't actually alone. He introduces Patty while she's hiding behind a tree, and the adventurers are totally shocked when Shira explains she's a fairy, his boss, and the one who saved his life. The whole squad was totally stunned and demanded to know what was going on. Fairies are insanely rare and known as the ghost tribe because they basically never show their faces to anyone else. Shiro asks if he's for real, and the fairy nervously admits they weren't even supposed to leave their territory. He thought they were totally normal, since the guild is literally called Blessing of the Fairies. Patty's super annoyed and asks why they'd ever bless a human, but Shura fires back that maybe it's actually happened before. Nesca asks if he's seriously clueless, and the guy gets totally confused, asking what he was even supposed to know. Seeing he's totally clueless, the sorceress explains that Blessing of the Fairies is actually a special drink only fairies can make, and it's also known as Fairy Made. She rushes back to Patty to ask if the drink was the cause, and the fairy just gives a super proud nod. Nesca watches as alarm starts shaking him, totally freaked out and asking if he actually drank that fairy mead. Sherber is totally lost, looking back and forth between Lyre and Nesca while the whole squad hits him with a million questions. Everyone's freaking out asking if he really drank fairy mead since one glass is worth a whole castle, and Rolf adds that it hasn't even been seen in 200 years. The guy's totally stunned to find out how rare that drink is, but Patty says she only gave it to him because he's her underling. The warrior is totally confused, but Sheriff says it's a long story, and once the squad hears a fairy actually saved him, they're all completely blown away. Lyre walks up to Patty to thank her for saving their friend and promises he'll do absolutely anything to pay her back. Shiro asks if they can help him find someone since the fairy's description was super vague, and they're totally down to join the search. With the whole squad finally back together, they're heading straight back to Ninoritch. After walking for a while, they finally reach the city, and the fairy's eyes light up with total wonder as Patty points and tells Shiro to check out the human home. The sorceress corrects her and says it's actually a city, Then Nesca explains that places have different names based on how big they are, and the fairy repeats it all back to show she finally gets it. Lyra tells Shuru straight up that life as a subordinate is seriously rough. Patty spots someone way off in the distance and wonders who it is, but as they get closer, they see Anna waiting for Shuru right at the city entrance. The little girl looks totally heartbroken, and when the guy asks why she's all alone, Aina just sprints over and gives him a massive hug. And they just started bawling their eyes out. Stella walks right up and tells him he finally made it. The Azure Flash crew heads out, and Aina's mom mentions the poor girl was so worried about Shiro that she didn't sleep a wink all night. The guy offers to carry Anna, but Stella shuts it down, saying she'll be way too big for that in just a few years. That's why she's holding her daughter close while she still has the chance. Shiro is stressed because Stella looks totally wiped out, but Yura snaps that she should have just told him if it was getting too much to handle. She stands her ground and refuses to say a word, making it clear he's never getting Anna because that's her daughter. He walks them both home and tells Anna to sleep tight, but just as he turns to head out, Stella calls him back because she forgot something. Stella welcomes him in and tells him to make himself right at home. Shore heads right back to the shop. Patty's jaw drops because this place is absolutely massive. The guy asks what kind of houses fairies have, and Patty tells him they build them way up in the trees to stay safe from monsters. The fairy switches gears and asks Shuro if he still remembers their deal, and he's totally down to help find her friend since this town is tiny and it'll be a piece of cake. Shuro asks the fairy to whip up the delicious maid he gave his heart for, and Patty says it's a total breeze as long as they have some honey. Getting honey is a total nightmare, and the last time she even tried, a swarm of bees jumped her and she almost died. While she's still talking, the guy reaches into his bag and pulls out a jar of honey to see if it'll work, and Patty's totally blown away that he actually managed to find some. She leans in for a closer look and is totally stunned, asking if that's actually honey, and Shuru tells her it's the real deal, 100% pure and straight from the hive. The fairy dips her finger into the honey for a taste, and she's totally shocked by how amazing it is. She's super hyped and says that honey would make her mead taste way better, so Shiro asks if it's actually for real. The guy says it's time to take a break, because sleeping on the hard forest floor has his whole body feeling totally wrecked. Morning hits and Shiro is totally passed out on the couch with the fairy chilling on his head, but then Aina bursts in and wakes them both up. He asks why she's even there, and tells Stella the shop is staying closed today. The little girl just tells him she's there to bring him some food. Aina walks over, totally curious, and asks who the girl sitting on the guy's head is. Shuro introduces his new boss Patty and says she's actually a fairy, his eyes sparkling with excitement as she asks if she's just like the ones from the storybooks. Patty asks who the kid is, so the guy introduces Aina and says she's his assistant at the shop. The fairy quickly switches gears and asks the girl if she knows some guy with blue hair and blue eyes. Anna says she's got no clue and hasn't seen anyone like that, leaving Patty feeling totally crushed. Shiro jumps in and points out that he and Ina don't actually know everyone living there. This place is tiny, so he knows they'll find him the second they start asking around. He asks Patty if she wants to start the search right now, and Anna jumps in, totally hyped to help out. Patty asks if Anna is actually down to help, and when she says yes, the fairy squeals with pure joy, but Shura jumps in saying they need to find a way to hide her. Anna tells her to hop into her backpack, and the fairy actually finds it super cozy in there. With everything finally sorted out, they headed off to track down Patty's friend. Shira walks right up to a group of people. He shows off a picture of a necklace with a pendant, but absolutely no one recognizes it. The lady at the town hall plays dumb about seeing him and asks for a name, while Gerald the merchant doesn't recognize a single thing he's selling. Even the dog, the mercenary, and everyone in the bar are totally clueless about who it belongs to. Shuri's eyes are glued to the photo because he's already asked 27 people, and literally nobody recognized that pendant. Aina thinks the fairy's friend might be from out of town, but Patty remembers him saying word for word that he actually lives in Ninoritch. Those matching necklaces were their only clue, so Shira snapped a photo of Patty's pendant to show everyone in town. Suddenly, Karen bursts onto the scene looking for the guy, and she brings up how he joined Liar's group for another mission and totally grills him, asking when he's finally gonna stop stressing her out. The guy tries to apologize, but Karen tells him it's totally fine. She just tells him straight up that she's super glad he's okay. Anna messes with his hair and teases him for blushing, but Shira totally denies it, claiming he's just overheating. He tries to switch the topic by showing Karen a photo of the pendant, and she starts checking it out super closely. She says it looks super familiar, but she just can't place where she's seen it before. The mayor promises to come back if she remembers anything, and when the guy asks if she's serious, Karen smiles and says she still owes him big time for all his help. She waves goodbye but promises she'll still swing by the guild every now and then. Shurdo asks if she's going to check out a mill, but Karen tells him that's not the plan at all. She's heading straight for the Azure Flash group to face the people who put her best friend in serious danger. She's giving off a super scary vibe, making the guy panic and shout that he volunteered, but the mayor just ignores him and walks off. Shura, frightened, is really hoping his friends Lyre, Neska, Rolf, and Kulthar are safe, and the second Karen leaves, Anna asks Shura if Patty can sleep in her bed. The guy turns to the fairy and asks her what she thinks about the whole situation. Patty's a little nervous, but agrees to watch the kid for just one night, so Shiro totally teases her by calling her a cute little tsundere fairy. Anna makes it home holding her backpack super carefully and tells her mom she's got something crazy to show her. But she's gotta keep a secret first, and even though Stella's a bit lost, she promises to stay quiet and asks what's actually going on. The girl says it's right in her bag, and while Stella's betting on a lizard or a frog, she's in for a huge shock the second that backpack opens up. The tiny fairy is resting inside, and Patty starts grilling Stella, asking if she's Anna's mom since their eyes are a perfect match. Stella sees the fairy and completely freezes up, making Anna start to get really worried. Patty dives onto the bed Sharuba offered the girls, jumping up and down because she's never felt anything this soft before. Stella brings over some tea and immediately asks for the lowdown on the guy Patty was talking about. Anna demands to know the truth too, and after the fairy goes silent for a moment, Shiley finally agrees to spill everything. The fairy remembers the exact moment she left her home for the first time and saw a guy in the woods hunting a unicorn rabbit. Patty had no clue what that gadget was, but it launched twigs at insane speeds, even though the guy was honestly trash with a bow and looked like he was about to burst into tears every time he looked like such a little kid that Patty started cracking up until her stomach literally hurt. Eventually, she got sick of all the crying and decided to step in, taking out that unicorn rabbit with one perfect hit. The guy's eyes went wide as he stared at her, totally stunned. He straight up asked if she was a fairy, and that's how they met for the very first time. Right after their crazy meeting, they finished eating the unicorn rabbit, and the guy was literally sobbing because it tasted so good. The fairy tried the food and thought it was totally gross, so she figured humans just have really weird taste. But then the guy admits he hasn't had a real meal in like 10 whole days. The guy thanked the fairy for saving his life and asked her what her name was. She froze up thinking about how badly people used to treat her, so she told him she'd spill the beans once he actually got good at hunting, and then the days just started flying by. They kept hunting as a team until one day, they actually became total pros. The guy asked Patty if he'd finally proven himself enough, and if she'd finally tell him her name. The fairy was super hyped to introduce herself, but she froze up the second she remembered being called a cursed child. She just couldn't bring herself to say it and promised to tell him later, so even though he was super worried, he didn't push her for answers. That was the last time they ever saw each other, and Patty tells Anna he was a true friend who always said that even if they were lonely together. The fairy is dead set on finding him just to swap names, but Patty realizes she's totally been rambling this whole time. Suddenly, water hits her face and she asks if it's raining, but Anna turns around with tears in her eyes and promises they're totally going to find her friend. The fairy looks at the girl, all emotional, and promises her that they're definitely going to find him. 2 hours earlier, Shuru steps out of a portal in just his boxers and a towel, thinking nothing beats a bath at home as he heads to the shop balcony to watch the sunset. Out of nowhere, Lyre pops up and calls out to him, so the guy tells him to hang on while he heads down to meet him. Shiri walks up and gets super worried when he sees the warrior's face is all swollen and bruised like he just got wrecked, but when he asks what happened to Lyre, the guy just brushes it off like it's nothing. Karen storms into the guild looking absolutely livid, and when Lyra asks if she's just there to scream about them taking Shuru on a death mission, the mayor says she's not letting anyone off the hook, so the warrior tells her to just punch him in the face if it'll help her calm down. Karen smacks Lyre across the face with everything she's got, sending the warrior stumbling back. The Azure Flash leader invites Shuri to the guild for drinks with Ami and the big boss, and Shuri's all in because it sounds like a blast. The whole crew meets up at the guild bar and raises their drinks high. Lyre starts the countdown, and as soon as he hits 0, everyone goes wild, even Kulfa Emil and may join in on the massive toast. Shiru and Lyre are slamming back their drinks while Rolf just watches them, looking totally lost in thought until Lyre asks if he hates the beer, and Shiru awkwardly admits that's exactly the. Nay says it's not even needed, and honestly, she's just not a fan of it anyway. Emmy asks if things are really that bad, and the guildmaster secretly agrees that the terrible drink selection is making the adventurers super cranky, but it's just too expensive to fix. Kilfa mentions she'd still love some wine or cider, because it smells awesome even if it's a bit sour, but Nesca tells her to stop being so greedy while Shiru asks if the drinks are really that tart. Lyre's already feeling the buzz and asks if he's never had wine, or if this big-shot merchant only drinks the super expensive stuff. Shura says he hasn't, but back in his homeland, you can get the best wine for super cheap. He explains there are actually 3 kinds of wine: red, white, and rosé, and the adventurers are totally losing their minds. Shiru says he's even heard of orange wine, but the truth is every bottle is totally different, with some being sweet and light while others are super strong. The prices are insane too. Shiru suddenly realizes the whole bar is staring him down, but when an old adventurer tells him to keep going, he explains that his home was a massive trade hub with all kinds of crazy drinks. Everyone's staring at him with total hype in their eyes, and Shiro just stops right there. He was already thinking about how much money he could make off this. If he plays this right, he can take out 3 targets in one go, so he spins around to the crowd and he tells them to come back in 3 days, promising to bring some awesome drinks from his homeland for everyone. Right then, Shiru looked like a totally different guy, slicking his hair back and suiting up in a sharp bartender outfit. Aina tells him he looks super sharp. He says she looks great too, and when Stella says he looks nice, he tells her she looks totally stunning and professional. He sets up a pop-up bar at the back of the guild hall for the night, and when Lyre shows up, he notices how fancy everyone looks and asks if Anna is working the shift too. They say their hellos, but Sherry really didn't want a little girl working at the bar. Too bad, she insisted on helping and even dragged her mom along. Nesco walks up and says they're ready to go, with the sorceress using her magic to whip up some ice while Kilful stays busy serving out drinks. He handed everyone their favorite drinks, giving Nesca chocolate liquor and Kilfas some fruit wine, then turned to ask Anna if she wanted one too. One line out rule: if the input is 1 block, I give 1 block input, and she hesitates, saying she'd like gin, smiling the. He gets the party started and introduces himself as Shiro, the guy who runs Shiro's shop. He says he brought a massive stash of drinks from his shop to celebrate after the forest mission, and everyone is losing it because even the richest merchant in the city doesn't have a collection this big. Shiro finally shouts that everything is free and the drinks are on the house, sending the crowd into a total frenzy, while the poor guy starts sweating bullets over the 3 million yen he just blew. He looks at this like a total investment and brings up the guild master, Ninoritch, to give a speech. Nay is super friendly as she greets everyone, telling them to have a blast tonight. The hungry adventurers start cheering and shoving to get their food, pinning Shiro into a corner until Nee sees the mess and slams her foot down. She gave off such a scary vibe that she'd cancel the whole event right then, so Shiro thanked her while the crowd finally started getting into lines. Lyre is the first one served, and when the guy asks what he wants to drink, he points at a bottle to ask what it is, so the waiter tells him it's a beer. Lyre takes the suggestion and grabs the drink, and Anna tells him it'll taste way better if he adds a squeeze of lemon. The Azure Flash leader follows the girl's advice and takes a sip, and he's totally blown away by the fizzy, light flavor and that perfect sour lemon kick. He downs a huge gulp from the mug, and when Shiro says it needs a pinch of salt, everyone else starts begging for a drink too. The customers are totally obsessed with the drink, so Shiro asks Stella for the bottle on his right to whip up a Mexican specialty. He's totally wiped out, but seeing everyone have a blast makes it all worth it, until a guy walks up with a smug grin and asks for the strongest drink they've got. He orders the strongest drink they've got, and the Sun adventurers realize he's actually Eldos the Indestructible, one of the 16 legendary heroes. Shiro asks if he's totally sure about wanting the strongest stuff and suggests a drink called Spurious that's so intense it could literally start a fire. He serves it in a tiny glass, making Eldos totally lose it as he calls Shiro a brat and yells that he's way too old for this since he's literally over 200. Shiro warns him that this drink is 96% alcohol and just one sip will knock him flat, but Eldos gets even more offended and brags that he's never been drunk in his entire life. The kid tells him to chill out before he drinks himself to death, but the adventurer just sighs and says he's gonna see how far he can take this. He tosses his cloak aside and tells Shiro to take the fight outside, but suddenly Rolf steps up and introduces himself as a humble cleric. Eldos turns to the priest and asks if he's there to preach, complaining that the kid totally insulted his dwarf pride, since dwarves are born drinking from barrels with booze in their veins. But the dwarf asks what the plan is, and the cleric suggests using a poison-healing spell that also works perfectly to snap someone out of being drunk. He looks at Shirov and says he can just revive Eldos if the alcohol hits too hard, and everyone totally agrees with the plan. Elda thought this drink would finally break him, but after taking down demon lords and ancient dragons, there's no way he's letting his knees hit the floor for the first time ever. The crowd goes wild hearing about legendary monsters and starts hyping up the dwarf hero, but Shiru suddenly notices Eldos looks way bigger as he demands a drink. The dwarf challenges him to a bet where if he gets drunk, Shiru gets whatever he wants, but if Shiru loses, he's buying drinks for life, so Eldos holds out his mug and tells him to fill it until it overflows. Shiru agrees to the bet, and the second the dwarf smells that drink, he realizes it's way more intense than anything he's ever had before. He tells his mom about all the people staring at him, but he's totally lying and making sure she falls for every bit of it. Shiru is totally stunned as the dwarf sighs, complaining that his stomach feels like it's on fire while betting his mug right on the counter. He calls the guy out, asking if he really looks that wasted, so Sherwin rubs his neck and admits he totally blew the bet. Eldos just cracks up, telling him that from now. He keeps cracking up until he tips over and hits the floor, totally wasted. The kid starts lecturing Eldos, reminding him that he totally warned him not to chug all that booze at once. If Rolf hadn't been there to help, Eldos might have. The guys are trying to remember the drink's name, and after someone calls it Spy Something, they decide to rename it the Hero Killer, but Shura has no idea that this drink is about. The Guildhall is a total wreck with adventurers passed out everywhere after drinking way too much, while a red-faced Nesca claims it's the best stuff she's ever tasted, kill. Shiru admits he spent a fortune, but it's worth it because now every adventurer is going to be hooked on his drinks, and Lyre is seriously impressed that this is the legendary merchant he's heard so much about. He says he's just happy everyone is finally chilling out, but right then, two dudes try to fight and just pass out on each other because they're so wasted, which is a huge. Kidulfa slaps Sheru on the back and tells him he's actually a solid dude, but when he whines that it hurt, she just tells him she didn't even hit him that hard. Lyre asks what the real plan was that night, and the warrior stares into a box, saying he saw some fairy wings poking out from inside. Shore turns to her and asks if her leader showed up, but Patty sadly says no, so the guy figures he's not an adventurer while the fairy starts apologizing. After seeing everything Shira sacrificed for her, the young guy and the warrior look at her with total sympathy. Days went by, and they still hadn't seen a single trace of Patty's friend. He showed that pendant to everyone in the city, but nobody had a clue, and even after putting up posters, he got 0 leads, so he tells the fairy that the person they're looking for probably. There are tons of other human cities out there, and when Patty asks if there's maybe 20, Anna throws her arms wide and says it's way more than that. Patty looks totally crushed because she has no clue how she'll ever find her friend now, but right then, Karen bangs on the door calling for Shuru. The guy is shocked to see the mayor there, and Karen looks dead serious like she finally figured out who they're hunting. She tells them she knew she'd seen that pendant before. The mayor reveals the jewel belonged to her great-great-grandpa, the very first mayor of Ninoritch. Aina's totally lost on what that even is, so Shuru. The mayor totally freaks out when he sees a fairy and demands to know what's happening. The guy spills the whole story and Karen is totally losing it because her ancestor actually knew a fairy, but when Patty asks where he's been, the mayor has absolutely no clue what she. The fairy figures out that Karen is her old friend's great-granddaughter, and once Karen confirms their family, Patty says she should definitely know where he's hiding. Karen's totally lost until it finally clicks, and she asks Patty how long fairies actually live. Patty says her clan lives for 3,000 years, and she's only 300, but the mayor explains that for humans, even reaching 100 is a massive stroke of luck. Her great-great-grandpa died ages ago, and this news totally wrecks Patty as she remembers how everyone used to treat her like a total outcast. Nobody ever cared about her, and since even her own parents hated her, she figured that if she just vanished, no one would even notice she was gone. So under a massive full moon, she totally ditched the rules and flew way past the border until she finally tracked down her friend. She'd never had anyone look at her with such kind eyes before, and getting a real smile and a thank you was a total first for her. For the first time ever, she finally had a partner to hang out with and fight right by her side. This was the first time someone actually put their life on the line just to keep her safe. This was the very first time in her entire life that anyone had actually given her a gift. That pendant was the ultimate proof of their friendship. She thought back to that amazing moment with him, remembering how she went from having zero friends to finally finding a true bestie. She'd never cried happy tears before, but the moment he asked for her name, she got hit with this sudden fear of losing it all. Deep down, she knew that if she actually told him her name, their friendship would be totally over. She was so freaked out she wouldn't even give him her name, always promising to tell him later, but he didn't push her at all and just said he couldn't wait for that moment. Patty stands there in total shock as the reality of her friend's death finally hits her, admitting he was the only person who ever made her feel at home, while Aina and Shuru look on with pure sadness. They ask what she's gonna do next or if she's heading back home, but she looks totally crushed and admits she has nowhere to go because she's been hiding a massive secret. She was actually kicked out of the fairylands for good. She lifts her shirt to show off a brand on her stomach, and when Sherba asks about it, she explains the fairy symbol literally means walking disaster. Patty admits she always felt like she shouldn't have been born, and even though her parents hated her for it, she still managed to live a pretty normal life. But then hundreds of rhinoceros beetles moved in right next door and started hunting the fairies for a snack. Once the nest was finished, they started multiplying like crazy and wouldn't move on until they ate every last bit of food. The other fairies started pinning everything on Patty, but Shirago totally lost it, yelling that they were just using her as a target when she had nothing to do with where those monsters set up camp. Patty claims the curse makes everything her fault, revealing that the clan leader was the one who actually named her Patty Falulu. In the fairy language, her name means the one who cuts through destiny, and Isekai'D gave it to her so she could fight the curse, but he still kicked her out. Shiro explains that's how it went down when she saved him, but the fairy admits she only rescued that dummy so he'd help her find her friend. But in the end, she was the biggest fool of them all, and as Anna looks at the fairy with tears in her eyes, Patty gently pats her head and tells her to stop crying because it. Shiro walks up and drops a heavy question, asking Patty if he's down to save the fairies. She says yes instantly, so Shiro asks if she's serious about going back after being kicked out. She looks down and says she has to pay back the leader for her name, and besides, her parents are still there. Even if they hated her guts, they were still her parents, so she had to help. Shiro leaned in close to the tiny fairy and asked why they weren't going to save them yet. Patty asks if he can actually pull that off, and the guy just smiles back, telling her he's totally got it covered. Patty and Aina both beg Shiro to save the rest of the fairies, and after he promises they'll definitely succeed, the whole crew heads straight to the Adventurers Guild. The moment they step into the guild, everyone starts whispering about Shira's mission to crush those rhinoceros beetles, and Knight tells him she's totally down for it. But she's scared to take the job since it's basically impossible. Shiro is totally shocked, and Aina and Patty look completely crushed behind him. The guildmaster explains that taking. The guy is stressing over the massive bill for all these hires, but Nea tells him money isn't even the biggest issue, they just don't have the clout to make it happen. The guildmaster says sorry for being useless and tries to bail, but Shira is totally not backing down. He tells her to hold on and says they should treat this like a deal instead of a job, and while Nea is totally confused, he tells her to pay close attention. Right then, he triggers his inventory skill and a portal pops open right in front of her. Maggie is totally blown away, and Shira explains that this is his special power and his way of proposing to her. Once the crew finds the ruins, he'll use his powers to carry all their heavy gear and loot, making sure they don't waste a single second, even if his mission takes days. He asks the guild master for her take, and Ney saying the deal sounds good really gets his hopes up. But she's actually got her own magic item that opens up an inventory, and Shiro is freaking out because it can hold as much as 3 whole wagons. Interfield feels bad for the guy, and Ney says sorry again because she just can't take the job. Suddenly, Eldos pops in and asks what the heck is going on. Eldos asks if he's in trouble, so Shiro says sorry for being so loud and explains he just really needs to wipe out those rhino beetles in the forest, which is all the dwarf needs to hear to say he's totally in. Shiro is totally confused and asks if he's actually serious about helping. The dwarf asks if he really forgot that they had a bet on the line. The young guy quickly says that he definitely remembers. He tells him to stop comparing him to those weaklings because he can crush the beetles solo without even breaking a sweat. Then Lara suddenly shows up complaining about the pain while the Azure Flash Squad offers to jump. Ney jumps in waving her sword and screaming that taking secret jobs is against the rules, but Eldos shuts her down and Lyra agrees that the dwarf is actually right. He says Eldos only helped Shiro to pay off a lost bet, and Kilfast starts clowning on the dwarf for his dramatic fall until Eldos tells her to zip it while litter. Nesca points out that since they aren't asking for cash, this isn't a job, while Kilfa hugs Shiro and says they'd always help their friends, which really touches the young man's heart. He thanks them and promises a huge party with those drinks once the monsters are gone, but some nearby adventurers overhear and ask to help just to get a taste, though the guy tells them it. He was just going through his stock when he found a bottle of legendary fairy mead, and the adventurers are so shocked he has it that they all rush to sign up for the mission, but she points right at the guy and demands proof he's got the mead, but then Patty pops out of Aina's backpack to confirm he's telling the truth. She knew every secret since she built it herself, and Shiro asked why the chief was finally showing his face. Nei is totally blown away when she sees the fairy grilling the guy about what's actually going on. The guy sighs and explains that Patty is actually his boss, and she's the one who wanted to get rid of the rhino beetles, while the fairy just wanted to save her friends, but since he's just a merchant, he couldn't face those scary monsters alone. He bows low before the guild master, begging Nei to save the fairies, as tears start welling up in his eyes. She starts bowing and begging right next to him to save Patty's family, and the fairy promises to make mead for everyone if they can just crush those beetles. He begs Nei to save the fairies, but she's totally stuck and starts complaining that Shiro was a jerk for making her look like the bad guy, right as the guild master orders every bronze. They're finally going to wreck that rhinoceros beetle nest, so she orders the squad to follow her into the forest as everyone heads out ready for a fight. They walk for a while until Patty finally says they've made it, but Shiro is totally shocked when she points right at a dungeon entrance and says their nest is actually inside. Patty explains that they finally found the ancient magical ruins the guild was hunting for, and even though the fairy says this cave has been here forever, she can't believe her eyes because her wildest dreams are actually coming. She whips out a map and breaks down the plan, splitting everyone into 3 teams by rank to keep everyone safe. The 6 mithril ranks will rush the ruins for a surprise attack. She tells Eldos to stay back as backup since he's a platinum rank, but Shiri warns he's actually heading into the nest all by himself, as the dwarf suddenly bolts away screaming in total shock. Right away, the rest of the adventurers follow his lead, making Nea go ballistic as she screams at them for being so reckless, so she tells the Azure Flash to stay back and guard Shuru and Patty while the group promises they've got it covered, and then Nea officially changes the whole plan. She's ordering everyone to follow Eldos into the nest and then lure those monsters out of the ruins. The adventurers jump straight into a wild showdown with the monsters. Shuru checks his watch and sees 2 hours have already flown by, hoping everyone is safe, but when Nei shows up and he asks how the mission went, Eldos just starts laughing and asks Shuru who he thinks he's dealing with. The dwarf slings his axe onto his back and brags that he didn't even break a sweat, while Nei confirms that Ed alone basically wiped out all those beetles. The guildmaster even steps up. Shuru is totally blown away that Eldos wiped out hundreds of monsters all by himself, and Lyra thinks it's just as insane, but then the guy casually asks if there was. The dwarf says he has no clue, and if he did have it, he probably just crushed it with the rest of the junk. Then he turns to Nei and asks for some meat, and Sheer rushes back to Patty and tells her the awesome news, and while the fairy stutters her agreement, he asks if she wants to go tell the others, but just as she's about to answer, he hears a desperate cry for help and asks if she heard it too, but he's totally clueless until she suddenly realizes something, shouts that she's gotta go, and bolts, leaving him so. Suddenly, he hears a weird noise, and a tiny fairy zooms and looking totally panicked and begging for help. Patty charges in right as the monster grabs the tiny fairy, but she's scared her magic will hurt her friend, so she just decks the beast and screams for it to let go. The beetle just smacks her back, making Shiru rush over in a total panic, while Kilfa suddenly leaps onto the monster, yells that she knows its weak spot, and jams her blade deep inside to finally let the little fairy fall free. Right then, Nesca blasts the monster with a massive ice spear, while Patty dives to catch the falling fairy and check if she's hurt, and she's totally fine thanks to. Right then, Lyre looks around and shouts to see if everyone is okay. He and Rolf are getting totally mobbed by monsters. The warrior yells that the whole place is crawling with bugs. Nei's jaw is on the floor after seeing the dwarf solo the whole group, but then an adventurer rushes over to say he found a hidden path at the back of the nest that was buried under all those dead monsters, and Nei thinks he's totally joking. Hattie blames herself for failing as the guild master and warns that the fairies are toast if they don't stop this, while Shiru asks if she can still use her old magic, and Lyra, who's fed up with the endless enemies, spots a guy holding Patty and demands to know what he's doing. Shiru asks the fairy if she's ready for their big move, and once she gives the okay, he and Patty grab that homemade flamethrower and let out a massive blast of fire together. The monsters get totally fried, and while the dude realizes their plan worked a little too well, they're just glad they aimed that massive blast at the sky. Lara asks if he's totally sure he isn't some secret op mage, but Nesca cuts her off and points towards something in the distance. Suddenly, an even bigger monster shows up in the sky with some seriously scary teeth. Lyra is totally stunned as Nesca realizes that's definitely the queen, and Kilfa is freaking out because she's absolutely massive. Shiru asks Patty if she can use that magic again, and the fairy says she'll take out this pest no problem, but Rolf yells that she's already charging right at them. The queen beetle is about to snap them in half with those massive jaws, and just as Shiru and Patty freeze up, Eldos jumps in and blasts her with his insane thunder of justice. He hits the monster over and over with a ton of electric blasts. The wounded queen starts to fall, and Eldos the dwarf apologizes for the wait, but he tells them not to thank him because he's just settling a debt. It's been ages since the dwarf really went all out with his axe, sequel, a gift from the immortal witch herself, and now Shuru is so curious that he asks if the word justice is carved right onto the blade. Ella confirms it, and thanks to Sigil, he can now use justice magic twice a day, which reminds him of how his grandma was obsessed with an old action show called Real Justice, starring Steven Sigil. The elders are shocked and ask how he knows all that, so Shiru spills the beans. Then the dwarf asks if he's Alice Gawemio's grandson since they look so much alike, right as a voice calls out for Patty. She asks what's going on, but as she spins around, she's suddenly face to face with the clan leader. A whole bunch of fairies suddenly pop out from behind the trees, leaving Lyra shocked by how many there are, while Nesca thinks they're the cutest things ever. The clan leader growls, asking why Patty's back from exile and why humans are jumping the beetles, but Patty snaps that since he kicked her out, she doesn't owe him a single answer. Shura steps up to the leader and tells him straight up that Patty is the one who saved his life. She begged him to wipe out the monsters and rescue the fairies, while the elder wondered if Patty was finally back to save them, pointing out how crazy it is that someone with a curse is actually the one saving their lives. Nesca cuts in to ask about the curse, so Patty shows her a birthmark on her stomach and explains that any fairy born with it brings a total disaster to their people. The sorceress is totally hooked once she realizes it's actually a seal, and Nestor explains that anyone born with that mark is gifted with insane magical powers. Back in the day, anyone with the seal had a total nightmare because they couldn't control their power, and the magic ended up eating them alive. But that's ancient history, since they found out anyone can master magic if they just learn the basics, and now these guys become top-tier sorcerers at the very peak of. Some far-off tribes still had totally wrong ideas about the seals, but there was actually nothing to worry about. It turns out these seals were actually a straight-up gift from the gods. She knows that if she masters her powers, she can save the fairies all by herself next time, and the clan leader actually apologizes to Patty for everything she went through, feeling totally ashamed. She tells him to quit saying sorry, because if he hadn't kicked her out, she never would have met Shuru or saved the day, so it turns out the old man was actually right. The other fairies are feeling super guilty, but Patty tells them it's not their fault, and after a while, they're back at Shuru's shop where the guy asks if. The fairy says she only helped because her grandpa asked, but Aina starts sobbing, begging Patty not to leave. Patty explains that humans live way shorter lives than fairies, and she doesn't want to be left all alone when they eventually pass away. She was really only there to find her friend, and while Shu says he totally gets it, the fairy stops to thank them for all their help until Karen suddenly rushes in with a letter. It was actually meant for her friend, so Patty tells her to open it, and the letter starts off by calling Patty his absolute best friend. It's been forever since they made that promise, and while the years flew by, he remembered how she'd always roast him for having skinny arms. They're even thinner now. Patty's super touched by the letter and keeps reading, finding out he met an elf years ago who told him that fairies live way longer than humans. He had the elf translate your name, Patty Folly Lou, and since it means the one who cuts through fate, he kept repeating it to himself while writing his letter because he thought it was so. He realizes he never even told her his name, so he finally introduces himself as Aaron Sankarika and thanks Patty for being such a huge part of his life as her friend. Shireva is totally hyped and asks Patty if this mead is some top-secret fairy magic, but she tells him it's actually super easy and offers to show him how it's done, starting by popping a bit of honey right into her mouth. She starts talking with her mouth full right after the fairy spits everything into a bottle, and Shira realizes that reality can be seriously cruel sometimes. Karen holds up an old family letter and says Patty was a huge help to her great-great-grandpa, making the fairy get all emotional as she reveals her friend's name was actually Aaron. He even managed to find out her name, which is a total win, and as she looks back on their time together, she realizes they were literally the only friends each other had. He actually found love and started a huge family with kids and even great-grandkids, and once Sherba confirms it's true, Patty starts crying happy tears because she's just so glad he lived his best life. Shura tells her that, yeah, humans don't live long, but time doesn't matter at all when it comes to true friendship. The guy tells her that Aaron will always be her friend in her heart, so the fairy wipes her tears and agrees, saying even Karen has moved on too. The guy asks the fairy to keep him and Ina in her heart, even just a tiny bit, then he reaches right into his pocket. He pulls out a photo of him, Ina, and Patty all smiling and making peace signs, telling them they're his absolute best friends, which makes Patty super emotional while Ina cries and the Azure Flash crew shows up in Liar smiles, calling them all friends, while Kilfalots from Meow talks about how lucky they are to be tight with a fairy, but then Ness. She's totally head over heels for Liar and isn't hiding it, telling him that every second they spend together is burned into her heart forever, so when Nesca asks the fairy what her, she says she's not scared of anything and is staying with them since the boss never gave her a return date, plus Nesca promised her magic lessons, and she can't just ditch a crybaby like Ina. She tells him time moves differently for her, so she's not going back to her kingdom until Shuru dies of old age, which gets a nervous laugh out of him since he's still got a long way to go. Ina bursts into tears and lunges at Patty for a hug, leaving Patty totally shocked and complaining about the sudden surprise. With everything finally settled, 2 months flew by in a flash, and the big harvest festival finally kicked off with the whole city looking awesome and totally packed. Sheravan promised the mayor he'd help out with the festival, so he sent Aina to snap photos of the crowd while he and Karen started auctioning off some gear. The guy was super hyped as he showed off a bottle of Spiritus, a drink famous for taking down heroes, while the crowd went totally wild bidding on every single item. Shuru reveals the final item, a drink so legendary that only people blessed by a fairy can actually taste it. The guy licks a bottle of meat and keeps his speech going, saying Patty made it and that she's the city's new tourism ambassador. So as the fairy gets all shy, Shuru tells everyone to give her a huge round of applause. Bidding starts at 1 gold coin, but this guy just keeps driving the price higher and higher. After the auction, Karen and Shuru take a breather on a bench while the guy celebrates his massive. Karen snaps back that anyone would freak out over that much cash since he sold a single drink for 50 gold coins, while Smile just says this is going to be a massive boost for the city's economy. The mayor thanks Shuru for making the whole plan work, but he gets all shy and says Patty is the one who actually made the drink, so Karen agrees as Patty walks over to join them. Watching them chat, the fairy suddenly remembers something and casually asks if the two of them can make a baby together. Shrew starts freaking out and asks what she's even saying, while Karen turns bright red and shouts they aren't even a couple, but the fairy explains that since Stella mentioned reincarnation there. Shuru gets super embarrassed and explains that humans have to do ceremonies before having kids, and a panicking Karen totally agrees there are way more steps first, right before Patty cuts them both off. She screams for everyone to shut up and demands Shiro stop refusing her, yelling that they need to make a baby right now. Shiro snaps back that she's totally abusing her power. The little girl says she'd love to grab a photo with everyone. He's totally down for that. The city doesn't have any streetlights, but the lanterns are making. Shiro lines up the perfect group photo, but right as he's about to snap it, a wound suddenly starts calling his name. He whips around and asks who she is, but she just asks if he seriously doesn't recognize her. Her face is barely visible in the dark, and he admits he's got no clue, asking her where they've even met before. This girl steps into the light and tells Shuru he's a total idiot because she's actually his grandmother. He remembers everything clearly, especially how he just knew his grandma was still out there and would definitely show up at the festival. Even after he became a merchant, his biggest dream was still to find her again. Shiro was having a blast at the festival with his friends when this girl suddenly shows up, and when he asks what she just said, she drops a total bombshell. She's actually his grandmother. Aina asks the guy who this lady is, and she shocks everyone by claiming she's his grandma. The little girl points out she looks way too young for that, so the lady leans. He's totally losing it, yelling that his grandma was over 80, just a sweet old lady and definitely not some fancy young girl, so there's no way it's her, but the guy is totally stunned when the mayor tells the witch the festival was a massive success thanks to Shuru, while Arisu watches and brags that her Shuru was the one who saved the witch says he's finally grown into a good man and all those childhood festivals were totally worth it, but Shuru still isn't sure she's really his grandma even though he keeps pestering her about her second favorite movie, so Arisu says she could pick Braveheart but goes with Mad Max instead, and when Shiro asks who her favorite actor is, she asked if he remembers when he was 7 and had an accident on the way home, and she had to change his pants. The young man says she didn't have to bring that up, and more importantly, Where has she been this whole time, and why did she just ghost him without a word? Arisu gives him a soft look, says she's sorry, and tells him to stop being so sad. Patty shows up looking worried and asks who this human is since she can feel a ton of mana coming off her, while Karen proudly steps up to introduce her. Check it out, it's the absolute legend herself, the undying witch Arisu Goemio. The crowd hears the news and starts swarming because everyone's dying to talk to the witch. Arisu snaps at the mayor for being way too loud, and even though Karen feels bad. A sword pops out and someone points it out as the legendary Mel Gibson, but Arisu just apologizes and says she's finally reuniting with her grandson. She grips her sword and tells everyone to have sweet dreams. Everyone suddenly passes out, and when Sheru asks what she did, the witch tells him it was all just a trick. She walks up and pulls him into a hug, but he tries to back away and asks what she's doing, so Arisu tells him they have to get out of there fast, and when he's confused, the witch just says it should be totally obvious. Arisu rips open a portal and drags them inside, yelling that they're finally going home, while the guy screams in terror as they plummet through the sky of the other world. Right before they smash into the roof, Arisu uses her magic so they can phase straight through the building and land on the ground floor. Shiru is totally crushed after that fall, while Arisu just stretches and says it feels awesome to finally be back home. The guy serves the witch some tea, and as she drinks, she teases him about being a former brat who's finally learned some manners. He looks totally annoyed and snaps back at it. Shura's like, duh, I've got a ton of questions, starting with who she even is, but Marisu just pouts and says being a witch should be. Shura tells her the whole family went crazy when she vanished and asks where she's been, but Arissa just says it's witch business she can't talk about, which Shura thinks is a total cop-out. He asks if she's using magic to look young like that illusion from before, but the witch says this is her real face, and Shuru is totally losing it. Arisu explains that her old look was actually just magic, since people would get totally freaked out if she never aged. She tells Shuru to watch closely, and then morphs right before his eyes. Shuru loses it when the young girl suddenly turns into an old lady. The witch asks if he's happy to. Arisu reveals that Shiro's grandpa told her to stay young forever just for him, constantly calling her beautiful, and every night they'd get super romantic and stay close with their faces all flushed. Shuru shuts her down, saying he's tired of hearing her talk smack about his family and grandparents, but Arisu just laughs it off and asks if he has any other questions, so he shows her the mysterious portal hidden right in his closet. Arisa explains that she and her husband were totally flat broke after building their house, so since they couldn't afford a vacation, she decided to turn their empty spare room into a portal straight to. They had a total blast hanging out and doing all kinds of wild stuff together, like Bistad de Genti Elu.